Mbak, kak dulu ya, Mbak. Aidan.
Tes, cek cek satu dua cek. Ini di rekam kamu. Ini tadi aku bilang, boleh. Kamu kalau mau nyoba latihan nggak apa-apa. Tadi udah pesan ya gitu ya. Latihan terus ya. Aku mau nggak, nanti kan apa aku bacakan CV kakak aja ya kakak? Boleh. Bacakan aja deh, nggak usah ditampilkan nggak apa-apa. Nah lalu aku bacakannya itu setelah kakak naik ke panggung atau sebelum kakak naik ke panggung? Sebelum, sebelum boleh. Mm-mm. Silakan kakak lalu. Mm-mm, gitu aja. Aku mau kamar mandi dulu ya. Aman ya? Iya. Aku mau kamar mandi dulu ya. Oke.
Oh, suka marah-marah tahu foto kematian.
Pengusaha ya Bapak Ibu ya. Dan
Cek dua, cek dua, cek dua. Kurang banter kok, eh. Cek, cek dua, cek dua lagi. Cek satu dua, cek dua, cek lo dua, cek. Oke, cek. Cek dua, cek lo dua, cek dua, cek satu dua, cek dua, cek dua, cek. Cek dua, cek dua. Kurang banter kok, eh. Cek dua, cek dua lagi. Cek satu dua, cek dua, cek lo, cek. cek dua, cek dua, cek dua, cek 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 dua, cek dua, cek dua, cek dua, cek dua.
Kamu lulus. Paling juga itu anak orang biru itu kan. Iya, oke, ini hanya itu. Nanti dulu kata terus kata sama moderator. Nanti kata sama. Ini buat anu tanya jawab soalnya. Cek tes aneh tes 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 satu dua tes dicoba tes 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 tes, 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 tes. Halo, tes. Cek, tes, mana ya? Tes, 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 satu, dua, tes, coba. Tes, 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 tes. Tes, 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 tes. Halo, tes. Tes, 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 tapi, tes. Cek, tes, 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 tes,
Untuk Mas Irfan ya, Bu.
tes.
Baik. Baik, baik. Oh ya, baik. Tes, tes, tes. Good morning. Tes. Masuk, Ibu. Tes. Oh ya, baik. Good morning.
Tes, tes,
Baik, Ibu. Siap.
tes, 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 satu, dua, tes, 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 tes,
Oh, sudah.
Tes, tes.
Oh, itu kan ada apa?
Tes, tes. Tes, tes.
Masih.
Tes, tes. 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 Tes.
Dan ini wifi-nya kok nggak bisa nyambung ke iPadmu ya? Wifi tuh. Nah, gak tahu. Wifi-nya nyala nggak? Aku mau update ini doang kok. Update wifi. Namanya apa? Oh iya, nyambungin. Thanks.
We're just gonna get you to the talk with Doctor. Yeah, that's it. Nice. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah.
Nggak kedengeran. Oh, baik. Sorry. Oh ya.
Tes. Baik, selamat pagi teman-teman dan kakak-kakak. Sebelum memulai kegiatan hari ini, mungkin kakak dan teman-teman yang masih di belakang bisa mengisi kursi yang paling depan terlebih dahulu. Yang masih kosong, silakan maju sebelum kita memulai sesi lecture pada hari ini. Silakan diisi tempat paling depan yang kosong terlebih dahulu ya. Terima kasih. Mungkin yang di belakang, teman-teman dan kakak-kakak bisa silakan maju. Karena masih banyak terdapat kursi kosong di sebelah kanan dan juga sebelah kiri.
Pula tak cel.
Untuk kakak-kakak yang di belakang, silakan maju ke dua baris depan supaya kita bisa segera memulai. Masih kami tunggu karena di depan sini masih kosong. Ya, dua baris masih kosong. Silakan maju ke depan, teman-teman.
Udah pernah keluar. Bagus kok.
Ayo silakan duduk teman-teman. Masih banyak yang kosong, silakan diisi di dua baris depan. Kalau tidak muat masih ada di row yang depannya ini. Untuk yang teman-teman sebelah kiri juga silakan diisi terlebih dahulu.
Ini sih. Makasih, Mbak. Thank you, Mbak. Ini UBD. Nama aku nggak ada di UBD, Mbak. Namamu juga. Oh, kamu nggak tanda tangan di depan kan? Oh, ada. Udah. Di kita. Ini nama saya, Bu. Berapa? Bisa 6. 6 aja, Bu. Yang ada di sini 6 aja. Dua, 2, 4, 5. Sama RPL aja. Tidak boleh sakan dari. Tidak. Untuk sekarang tidak masih. Ya, selama sesi ya. Atau sekarang boleh. mahasiswa Sydney. Oh, saya sampaikan pas mulai. Sekarang aja. Sorry, we have a rule here.
Jangan gitu, sungkan aku juga masih.
Aku juga sungkan deh.
Bisa aja, bisa aja kalau mereka ya bisa. Yang penting kan mereka enggak.
Oke. Kita bisa paling pasti.
Baik, kepada kakak dan teman-teman, sebelumnya izinkan saya untuk menyampaikan terlebih dahulu. Rules untuk lecture hari ini diharapkan kakak dan teman-teman tidak membawa makan dan minuman dari luar dan memperhatikan pemateri dengan saksama. Terima kasih.
Masikin tambah printer terlalu ya masikin. Kayak ya cukup. Ya gitu loh, Pak. Berarti tablet itu sih ya. Printer itu terlalu. Hah? Printer ah? Karepean. Oh, Kak Rumah sih itu udah pokoknya. Anggarannya. Bu, terserah. Satu kanal satu dokter. Ya, ya salah sih Dokter Verna ya. Iya, heeh. Iya, dokter Verna ya Kak apa-apa. Printer.
Baik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and warm greetings to everyone, honorable speakers, lecturers, and dear participant. The head of the Bachelor of Midwifery Program, Dr. Wahyul Anis, Sarjana Kebidanan Bidan Magister Kesehatan. The head of the Midwifery Professional Program, Bu Woro Setianingtyas, Sarjana Kebidanan Bidan Magister Kesehatan. Our speakers from Western Sydney University, Professor Hannah Dahlen and Dr. Hazel Keedle, all lecturers of the midwifery undergraduate and professional programs, dear student of the bachelor program, RPL, and midwifery professional program, students from Western Sydney University, and students from University Brunei Darussalam. First of all, let us express our gratitude to God Almighty for His blessings. We are able to gather here today in a good health. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Anjani, as the Master of Ceremony, who will be guiding you throughout today's event. So, welcome to today's guest lecture on the topic Advancing Woman-Centered Maternity Care, Listening to Women and Reducing Unnecessary Intervention in Childbirth. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all participants joining us today guest lecture. whether you are here with us in person or via Zoom meeting. So, yes, this lecture is open for everyone joining us online as well. Before we begin, let me say hi first for everyone who in Zoom meeting. It's wonderful to see such great enthusiasm for both audiences. We are so happy to have you with us. And today, we will explore the importance of truly listening to women's voices and experience during childbirth, as well as understanding how we, as a healthcare providers, can minimize unnecessary intervention to ensure safer and more respectful maternity care. And before we proceed to the next session, we will begin by singing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, followed by Hymne Airlangga. May I kindly invite all guests and participants to stand up, please? For Indonesia Raya, please stand and at attention in a formal and respectful manner. Let us begin with Indonesia Raya.
Hiduplah bangsa itu semuanya. Untuk Indonesia merdeka, penemukan dunia cinta. Indonesia merdeka, merdeka, Indonesia, Indonesia merdeka, penemukan dunia cinta. Indonesia
Now we will continue with the Hymne Airlangga. For Hymne Airlangga, please place your right hand on left chest as sign of respect.
yang begitu
Thank you. Please be seated. Next, allow me to briefly introduce the overview of today's lecture topics. We are deeply honored to join by two speakers. For the first session, we will going to hear from Dr. Hazel Keedle as Associate Professor of Midwifery, Program Lead Bachelor of Midwifery, School of Nursing and Midwifery, Western Sydney University, who will present the first session titled Listening to Women's Voices, Lessons from Research on Birth Experiences. And the second one, we will hear from Professor Hannah Dahlen, Professor of Midwifery, Associate Dean Research and Higher Degree Research, School of Nursing and Midwifery, Western Sydney University, who will deliver the second session titled Reducing Unnecessary Intervention in Childbirth. Thank you for Prof. Hannah and Dr. Hazel. Let's give an applause first for our speakers. So we will now move to the next session, which includes the introduction of our speakers, followed by the lecture and discussion session. And from this point on, you will no longer accompanied by me. Instead, the session will be guided by our wonderful moderator, who will lead us through the presentation and facilitate the discussion. So allow me to introduce our moderator for today, Kak Didi. Her name is Dian Maharani, who is more familiarly known as Didi. She is Bachelor of Midwifery graduate from Universitas Airlangga. In terms of experience, she has been actively involved in various roles, including as a social media admin since 2019 and a part-time live host, where she promotes products through digital platforms. She was also selected as Faculty of Medicine's Universitas Airlangga Ambassador from 2022 until 2023. And in addition, she has contributed as freelance translator in several international academic events, including webinars and guest lectures with speakers from Western Sydney University. And she also has extensive experience as a master of ceremony and host seminar held at Universitas Airlangga, as well as welcoming distinguished guests to the faculty. And this session will be guided by our moderator. With a great respect, I would like to invite our moderator, Kak Didi, to the stage. Welcome, Kak Didi. Let's give an applause for Kak Didi.
Okay, thank you, Anjani, for the really excellent opening for today's event. So, hello, everyone. Oh my God, are you guys already eaten? Already do a breakfast? Okay, let me ask you again. Hello, everyone. Please, more excited. Hello, everyone. Okay. Well, I guess everyone in here are actually kind of nervous because we're going to do like a discussion about material, about thing that actually really common in Indonesia as a midwife. So I hope everyone in here is going to take a note. So if you guys have any question about anything that will be delivered in here, the material, so please take a note first, and then we're going to do like Q&A session. Okay? Okay, guys? Okay, guys? Okay. So, maybe I'm going to tell you first about what we're going to do after this. We're going to have like a Q&A session about the two material that's going to be presented by our wonderful speakers. So everyone in here, you guys need to take a note because Hazel and also Prof. Hannah already prepared some gift for all of you that actually have any question and want to ask about something or have any question that you want to discuss about. Okay, guys? Okay, so there's going to be like a 6 person that lucky enough to get a koala from Australia. So please prepare yourself. Okay. So maybe I'm going to invite our speaker first to this stage. So please to Hazel, come to the stage, please. Give a big applause, guys. Ask Prof Hannah to come here too, or you want to do like a separate, like what we already discussed? Okay, 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 guys. So for the first speaker, we're going to have Hazel as our speaker. Maybe I'm going to read some brief, so all of you in here already know about our speaker in here. She is Dr. Hazel Keedle as Associate Professor of Midwifery, Program Lead Bachelor of Midwifery, School of Nursing and Midwifery, Western Sydney University. Do you want to do like a little bit open speech? That's okay. Okay, maybe this a little bit of about Dr. Hazel, or we know as Hazel. So the position was she is actually a senior lecturer of the School Nursing and Midwifery, and then Dr. Hazel Keedle is a PhD, is a senior lecturer in the School of Nursing and Midwifery, and already doing some wonderful research about birth trauma, midwifery, pregnancy, birth, and postnatal period. And also, we already discussed VBAC, or vaginal birth after cesareans. And the research and publication is already a lot. So for everyone in here that actually want to know about the research that Hazel already been doing, you can go to her Instagram and watching and looking for her research. Next, you can scroll. Bisa di scroll lagi? Okay, I think that's enough for for the introduction. We already know her, so without further ado, I'll give the time and the floor for you. So the floor is for Hazel. Please, everyone, give the big applause. In here or mobile? Okay.
Is that okay? Selamat pagi. It's so wonderful to be here again and speaking to you all. So today I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey of the research that we've published so far with the birth experience study. And then next week, I'm going to go into kind of the solutions and what the women told us that they really need. So I'm splitting this into two. This week, we're looking at what we were told by women and what their experiences are. And next week, we'll look at the solutions. But I do just want to give a word of warning. I do research in quite powerful topics such as birth trauma and obstetric violence. And so there will be some talking about birth trauma and obstetric violence and some quotes from women. So just protect yourself. And if you need to step away from the auditorium or look away from the screen, please do, as long as you're feeling okay. And next week will be a lot more positive, I promise. Do I have a clicker or do I just say next? Next? Okay, all right. Hannah's going to go into this in a lot more detail for you about really, what is the reality of maternity care right now, especially with risks and the challenges. But I kind of wanted to give you a bit of an overview of really why we're doing our research. We have this, we believe as midwives that childbirth is inherently a physiological, transformative life event. However, it gets managed in a very different way. We know that we've got cesarean rates increasing. We have really high rates of induction of labour, especially in Australia. I think from what I was learning over the last couple of days, your induction rates aren't so high, but they seem to skip induction and go straight for cesarean, which is why your cesarean rates are increasing. And that's both in middle income and high income countries. So what is the impact of this? And what I'm really interested in is how does this impact women? As clinicians, we should always keep them at the center of our care. And we say that we do women-centered care, but do we actually really listen to what women are telling us? And we know that this is going to have the way that women birth, the way that they are cared for, has massive effects on how they feel about themselves postnatally and going into motherhood, and also impacts on their babies. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the birth experience study. It originated in Australia, in Sydney, with just two of us, myself and Hannah, way back in 2021. To think how much it's grown now is really quite amazing, but we had a few months to get a survey together to launch it in line with a documentary that was coming out. And we'd worked on quite a few surveys already, so we just put our heads down, got it done, and had no idea how much this survey would grow. Next slide, please. It has now grown to 14 countries across the globe, and that includes Indonesia. And right at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share something very exciting and a QR code that I all want you to share on your own pages. I reckon they've probably got some really big Instagram people here in the room, I'm sure. You could reach this out to lots of different people, because we are doing this study and this survey here in Indonesia too, led by Universitas Airlangga. But we've grown from our little country, well, big landmass, but little country down in Australia, to across Asia and Europe. And I'm always very proud. A lot of the research we think comes from Europe or America, but we started this in Australia, and I'm very proud of the representation that we have across Asia as well. So Indonesia, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, China, we have these growing across Asia, which is so important. Okay, next slide, please. So you will find on my slide, and I hope they're useful for you, a little bit of Bahasa Indonesia as a summary at the bottom of each slide to help you follow along. They're on most slides, some slides don't have it. So let me tell you a little bit about our study. It was a co-designed study. So what that means is, yes, we had some questions that we knew, but we actually asked women and consumer organizations to help look at the wording of the questions, to come up with other questions, so that it was designed by women and it was for women in that perinatal period. We actually wrote a whole paper on how we did the design, how we did the co-design, and then how we used social media methods to distribute our survey. And we were very surprised by the amount that we got. We got 8,804 completed survey responses. And there were some questions where people could write their experiences. And on those, we had over 54,000 comments. So that's kept us very busy since 2021. But I've always got a little bit of impact there for you to think of as clinicians, because you might not all be researchers. So what can you learn as well from us as our research is that actually everything we do should be co-designed. Our models of care should be co-designed. And the way that we give care should be co-designed, always keeping the woman at the center of the decisions that we are making. If you are going to bring in a brand new model of care, or even continuity of care for students that I know that you're leading here in Universitas Airlangga, is including the women who will be cared for in that co-design, asking them, how would you like this to look? Sure, I can do that. I can do that. Which one is it? That one. All right, no worries. Okay, so I am up here at the moment. Let's prioritize women's needs. And then the other thing I think is really important is what type of questions that you ask women, and thinking about the responses you want to get. Often we'll just ask a question and not really think about whether it's designed well enough for the women to be able to answer correctly. So in our survey, we asked questions from everything, all the way from, who was your healthcare provider, all the way through to breastfeeding and everything in between. But we gave opportunities for women to write their responses as well. Does this also operate the slides? I'm not sure. Next slide, please. So in summary of what our study really was back in 2021, that's when we launched it. We had 130 questions with 4 validated tools in that question, in that survey. We translated it into 7 different languages, and we had it co-designed by maternity consumer organizations. Next slide, please. Next one. I'm so worried to press a button and I lose it. Okay. And in that time, since 2021 to now, 2026, we've had 9 publications. That's 8 from Australia and 1 from the Netherlands. And another one has just been submitted to a journal from our Korean database or data set. And so I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey through those publications so you can get an idea of what we have looked at, what questions we have asked, and what the women have told us. I'll get a sip of water while we go to the next slide, please. Okay, now the first one's a very special little paper that we did, and it's a little bit strange. We often think our academic papers are going to be survey responses or quantitative with lots of graphs and numbers. But the first one that we actually published was a beautiful paper that I did with that beautiful person standing next to me, one of my closest friends, Pixie Willow. And that's a very dramatic name because she's a very dramatic person. And she is a poet. She's also a drama therapist and got lots of other roles that she does. But she's a published poet. She has her own book on poetry published. And we've known each other for many, many years. And she always said to me, I'd love to be able to write some poetry about women's experiences. And so we put that into our ethics application. We got funding for her. And she started writing poems from the women's actual words that they wrote in the survey responses. And then we published it, which was really exciting. Next slide, please. Here's one of them here. And it is in English, and I'm going to try and just read a little bit of it so that you can maybe hear the rhythm of what I'm saying. By the time I reached the pushing stage, I was coached to hold my breath and pushing mid-contraction. I had a time limit. The baby had to be out within the hour. Eventually, the doctor said, the vacuum is our best option. Now, when she wrote this, she had this feeling of a woman being in labor, so that the words were the speaking that she was saying in between, and then the pauses were the contractions that she was having, and then she would talk again. And many of you as midwives would recognize that when you're caring for women, they can talk to you in between the contractions, but then they have to concentrate and not talk during the contraction. And when you get all the way through that, I think you feel like you've had your baby at the end of it. Again, like I said, this is quite a strong topic because all of the poetry papers were about birth trauma. So there's a lot of strong comments in there. So she talks about having a forceps, feeling like there was a lot of people in the room. She felt she was dying. She asked them to stop. They ignored her. And that she felt how wrong it was. And she felt that she had failed her baby when she was past her baby. But this one's all about the rhythm of it. There's so many different ways you can do poetry, and I'm not a poet, so I can't really tell you all the different language for it. But I really like this one because of the rhythm of it. Next slide, please. So why is it actually important to even do something called poetic inquiry? And it's a form of research. It's because it reminds us that there are human beings behind this data, and that we can't always connect or even feel like they're a human if we're just looking at numbers. When we're looking at statistics all the time, we forget that there's women behind those statistics. But in this poetry, you can really feel the emotion. And then that helps you as clinicians to understand and have empathy for that experience. Now, each of those poems are an amalgamation of lots of different stories, but she then brought them together as all these different poems. So I like this. This is about radical listening. This isn't just about listening and going, oh, there's a poem. It's actually hearing the emotions and connecting with the fact that there were women behind them telling those stories. Next slide, please. Here's a little one that came from it as well, and it's called Because the Baby Did Not Fit. Was one we never really knew. The baby did not fit. One doctor made me feel I had no choice. It was traumatic. I felt out of control, misinformed, and distressed. the baby did not fit. So this poem really focused on the words that she was told by the clinician and then how that made her feel. Okay, next slide. Right. And I like this idea as well, that it actually gives us a little bit of emotional intelligence, and to realize that behind those poems, there's so much information. And the way that we can learn from this as clinicians is to try and connect with storytelling. We love stories. We love to hear women's stories. I'm sure you love to hear your midwives and your students' stories. And this is a way to connect with data, is to listen to that story. But with poetry, there's also the unsaid. It's the gaps between. And they bring their own emotions and their own powerful pauses. And then it can actually the aim is to try and make you feel quite emotional, and to get you to then want to make change, to not want to have a woman write or have the words that would be in such a traumatic poem in the future. Okay, I think that's it on poetic inquiry. You probably weren't expecting some poetry this morning, so I hope that's made you think. Next slide, please. All right. Now, the next paper that we had was really quite a very powerful paper, and that is about obstetric violence. Now, there are lots of different definitions out there on obstetric violence, and a lot of feelings from healthcare providers, even around the term obstetric violence. And I'm not sure if that is also, you feel like that in Indonesia as well. But we did ask these women, and we said, did you actually experience obstetric violence? And we gave a very general definition of experiencing harm or violence from a healthcare provider at any time during your pregnancy, labour and birth or postnatal period. And what we found that shocked us, because we'd never asked this in Australia before, was that just over 1 in 10 women said yes to experiencing obstetric violence. And then we saw higher rates if they were younger mums, if they had a lower income, if they didn't have tertiary education, or if they were without a partner, or if they were First Nations. And this all impacted to result in higher obstetric violence rates. But we didn't just find out the numbers. We then asked women to actually describe their experiences for us. Next slide, please. And what we found is that there were 3 main categories. So the women felt that they were dehumanized, they felt violated, and they felt powerless. And I think it's a bit of a journey. I think, first of all, they feel dehumanized. They feel like a number in the system. They don't feel like they're getting individualized care. And then they feel that they lose that power. With the dehumanization, you suddenly have that lack of power and agency. And then I think it allows for a breeding ground for violation. When us as clinicians potentially don't see that person as a person, we don't think they have any power, then potentially it's easier to violate them. And around that was disrespect, abuse, and then non-consented vaginal examinations also came up in this too. Next slide, please. Here's a couple of quotes, and I did warn you there'd be some quotes. So a large majority of them were around that I felt dehumanized. And so here one woman says, nobody told me the procedure was optional or gave me the choice to opt out. There were 3 people I didn't know standing and looking at my exposed naked body. And the important thing to remember here is that you might hear that and go, well, obviously, she's naked, she's having a baby, and there's 3 of us in the room. What would be the problem there? But it's about how women felt about that experience, not how we perceive the experience. This woman said, I felt like I was on a conveyor belt of labour, just people walking through the steps to deliver a baby without considering that I was involved. So these really show that kind of dehumanizing, they're not feeling like they were even valued as a human. Next slide, please. Then there's the powerlessness, being told, advised I would need to have an induction, continue to push medical intervention regardless of my wants or need. The OB would not allow me to decline. So feeling like they don't even have that agency, that if they don't want something. And we often say to women, don't we, just say no, just say you don't want to do that. But that's very difficult in a patriarchal system when we have a power imbalance. It's difficult to say no when we've been trained to say yes. Another woman said she was put in stirrups without discussion or explanation. I was restrained in the entire birth. We have to, with that, think about consent, that consent cannot really exist very well in that coercive environment. If you're told by somebody, you must do this, or your baby might die, or, you know, looking at other things that might happen, can you actually really give consent in that coercive environment? And this really came out of the comments. Next slide, please. And just a few more there, just to finish up with, I think that second one is a repeat. But this woman said, I felt dehumanized because nobody told me the procedure was optional. They didn't give me choice to opt out. I was very clearly highly distressed, and they didn't pause or stop the procedure to check my consent. And this one goes on to say that even the midwife laughed at her when she said she didn't want this to happen. Now, we'd like to think this doesn't happen, but you know, we have the evidence that it does. And what we can see from our international side of this is this happens in every single country as well. There isn't any country that's immune to women feeling like this. It's not every woman. This is 1 in 10 women in our country, but it's important to give them a voice. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is we had a paper where we looked at just the experiences of women who had said yes to experiencing intimate partner violence or domestic violence. I'm not sure what your language is here. And we had in our survey, 13.6% of them said that they had experienced intimate partner violence at some point in their lifetime. It didn't have to be current or in the last year, it was at some point during their lifetime. And then we had a look at what were their outcomes. And so this one didn't have comments, this was all numbers. But what we could see is that these women, you know, if you're in the standard maternity care system, that's one part. But when you bring this hidden trauma history, then it really does it can complicate the experience. We know that it significantly impacts ongoing physical and psychological health, regardless of whether that violence is still occurring or it was in the past. So this is what we wanted to look at in this paper. Next slide, please. We found that there were higher risk factors, so there were higher rates of preterm birth, and that's within the literature as well. That's nothing new from our paper. But we did find in this paper, which was different from other publications, is we looked at how women felt they were treated, not by their abusive partner, but by their clinician. And they felt there were higher rates of feeling pressured to accept interventions. And pain relief as well. They felt that they were being pressured to do things. There were lower rates of autonomy and respect, and lower rates of breastfeeding and skin-to-skin contact. So there was actually quite a few different things that were there, but I've just put a few on the slide. And I think we have to recognize the impact of that. Like, how do we then change that? What is going on there? So next slide should help us with that. There's this kind of series of events that's kind of happening. So if we start up at the top up here, women are coming in with this pre-existing trauma. And then there's a potential that they're then experiencing an unconscious bias from the clinicians. Now, we didn't ask the women in our survey if they had disclosed IPV to clinicians, and some will and some won't. But there's potential, if they did disclose, and to potentially have some providers either minimize or dismiss the woman's concerns. That then results in this loss of autonomy. So Madam and Maury, they're just some of the validated tools we used. That means decision-making and respect. So they felt like they had less respect. And then feeling powerlessness. And even just, you know, in that system, even whether or not their abuse was current. And then finally, there's the potential for re-traumatization through this. It replicates that kind of coercion. And imagine, you know, you've got this history of trauma and then you experience more trauma in the system. So I kind of summarize this as they come in with this trauma, but unfortunately, once they get out of our system, they leave even more traumatized. And that's not okay. So what can we do about that? What we need to do is to provide trauma-informed maternity care. And I don't know if that's something that's really explored much yet in Indonesia, if you're used to using that term. We're using a lot in Australia at the moment, but I think we need to explore a bit more what that actually means with further research. Next slide, please. And I think also that, we've got this tip of the iceberg is what we see as clinicians. A woman might disclose something to us, or we might suspect something, but what we're not really realizing is everything that's going on underneath. The hidden burden of that, the PTSD, the re-traumatization, and simple procedures that we might see as simple can be, extremely re-traumatizing for women. Next slide. Okay, so then we had a look at some of our international data, and we've got data from the Netherlands, and they found that there was 25% of women who experienced a negative childbirth experience. And to get a better understanding, we then used the socio-ecological model to get an understanding of, well, why did they experience a negative childbirth experience? Next slide, please. And we found that there were these 3 different levels. So at the organizational level, there was higher rates of negative birth experience if they had obstetric-led care, or if there was a lack of continuity. And then in the clinical risk, there was preterm birth being a clinical risk, pregnancy complications, and induction of labor. And then in the individual risk there, you've got adverse mental health. So if they came with mental health issues in the past, if they're having their first baby, or if they're of non-Dutch ethnicity, so if they were a migrant to the Netherlands. These are all things that we saw contributed to that negative birth experience. Next slide, please. But there were some protective factors. And so when you're being hit by the complications, the interventions, and you may be vulnerable, either by English not being your first language, or having a first baby, then the protective factors that shielded women against that was feeling like women had high autonomy, that they were making the decisions by themselves, that they had this continuous support, both socially, but also through a midwife. And this, really strong social network as well. Those things were all protective for the women to not feel they had a negative experience. Okay, moving forward. It's very negative, my presentation, isn't it? But I'm sorry. Not all women have a great experience. Next slide, please. Okay, then we had another paper. And this one looked at women's experiences of induction of labor, which is so high now in Australia. And certainly our students here will be thinking they probably see inductions of labors like, you walk into birthing unit on a morning and everyone will be lined up for their inductions. It is so common now. But we looked at a question, which I'm going to go into more detail next week, but we asked women, what would you do differently for your next pregnancy? But then we pulled out just the ones where they talked about induction of labor. And a massive 93.3% said that they would delay or completely refuse an induction if they were to have another pregnancy. Now, that does not endorse induction of labor. Like if it was such a wonderful thing to do, that should be the other way around. They'd all say, yeah, I'll have one next time. But all of these women were saying, today, I will not have another induction next time. And, we can see this is against the backdrop of rising interventions, a high in national induction rate, even higher if you're a first-time mum, potentially non-medically indicated reasons. And then this cascade of intervention that can happen once you start the induction, it just keeps on going. And the women are experiencing that negatively. Okay, next slide, please. And then, so here's a bit more detail on what the women were saying. 54% of them said that they would actively resist the pressure. 25% would wait for a spontaneous onset of labor. They prefer to wait rather than have an induction. And then 20% will actually arm themselves with knowledge. So they really felt that they didn't have the knowledge for the first time. They felt bombarded with just the demand when you're having your first baby that you will be induced without any of the explanations of what can happen or what the experience might be like. And I think when you hear women being discussed or told about induction of labor, they're often not told what they might experience, that cascade of intervention, and how that actually might make women feel. That's not shared so much. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and I think where we see the decision is a real challenge is right up here. When the induction of labour is about to happen, this is the point where women need to be involved just before that happens, because we can then see it will go down. We know they'll have to be continuously monitored. they're likely to have an epidural that can lead to an instrumental delivery or a C-section. And really informing at that point, how do you think you'd feel if that's the way that it went? But they just felt really coerced into that decision, and then really grieved the opportunity to be able to go into spontaneous labour. But something we can do as clinicians is think about how do we get informed consent? How do we engage in those conversations? So even if you don't have a lot of induction here in Indonesia, but you have a lot of women going straight for a cesarean, you know, have you gone through all of the framework of asking questions? So it's an easy one to remember because it's all about using your brain. And that looks at what are the benefits of doing something. So actually having that discussion about the benefits of this procedure is X, Y, Z. But what are the risks of it? Like being aware of what those risks are. And then what are the alternatives? Like what else could you do instead? Is there only this option or are there other options around? The intuition is really important. Actually asking women, how do you feel about that? You know, what's your body telling you right now? How are you feeling about this option? And most of the time, we do have time to ask this. Not everything is an emergency. And then another vital part is, well, what if we do nothing? Like, what could happen if we did absolutely nothing at this point? And often, nothing will happen if we do nothing. But it's going through this like little kind of acronym with women so that they can feel that they're really involved in the decision making. The decision making is ultimately down to them. And actually, maybe we need to buck the trend and actually look at alternatives. Maybe we don't need to just go along with the routine just because these are always done every single morning. You know, is that okay? Or can we actually question this? And certainly, this is what Hannah and I do. We question this all the time. Go, do we actually need to be doing this? What are women saying about this? Okay, next slide, please. And other things you can look at is, well, how do we evaluate how we do routine interventions? Certainly when we think about the obstetric violence and we think about routine vaginal examinations, but why? Why do we need to do that? Is that something that we've got to do? And question that. What does the evidence say about that? And midwives, we really should be there as that guardian of informed consent. We need to make sure that it's actually been given. You know, how would you then feel as the midwife if you've seen all this happen in front of you and you potentially couldn't step in and say, oh, do you feel like you really understand what you've just signed? That again is tricky in our patriarchal system, but you are a professional and you do have that expectation. And then really protect that autonomy. If she says no, then maybe don't just get somebody else to come in and try and, you know, get her to change her mind. Actually respect the fact that the woman says no to something. It's okay, document it, but actually respect it as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so in this presentation, I'm not sure how long I've been, but we're getting close to the end now. In this presentation, we really looked at what are the drivers of trauma. So that's why it's been such a heavy presentation. We've looked at there is the non-spontaneous births, we know that, the existing mental health or social experience such as IPV. But we can also see this in very heavy obstetric-led or medically-led environments as well, which can then stimulate things like, you know, increased interventions. But the protective stuff is stuff I'm going to look at next time. Actually look at what women told us that works. Like what can we do to actually fix it? So there is some sunshine after this rainy cloud of a presentation. We'll be looking at, well, what helps women feel they have high autonomy, and actually what is respectful care, and what do women actually say about continuity of care? We've got evidence out there on the benefits of midwifery continuity of care, but what is it that women say about it? Why is it so important to them? And that's stuff we're going to explore later. But I actually also want to know, how do we get all this information from Indonesia? And this is where we need your help. Next slide, please. I think my little summary for you for this presentation is, you know, we need to recognize the global medicalization and that we can start feeling it's normal and then not challenge it. When every woman on that Monday morning is being induced or every woman is going for a cesarean, it becomes so normal to us that we are desensitized by it. if every woman is having routine vaginal examinations and there's no option for them, then we become desensitized to it. And that's what leads to that dehumanization. And that we know is a part of obstetric violence. We do need to recognize that women are coming in with trauma, but we are also actually causing trauma for some women too. And so therefore we need to embrace, well, how can we fix that with a trauma-informed lens? And what does that look like in Indonesia compared to how that looks like in Australia? And that relational continuity, and we'll go into more details on the women's experiences of this next week, but it's really, it really is an important fixer of the issue. When you know the woman that you're caring for, when you have been with her from the very first appointment all the way through her pregnancy, you're there during labor and birth and afterwards, it's almost impossible for you to dehumanize her because you've developed a relationship with her, one built on trust and equity. You're on the same level. And that really protects the woman from trauma and violence. They still might have a traumatic time for whatever happens during the labor and birth, but so much of trauma comes from the clinician interactions, and that's what it protects against. Okay, let's move forward. Right, this is where I need your help. So we have launched Best Indonesia, which is the birth experience study here in Indonesia. And this QR code is a link to the survey. And what I'd love you all to do is to get that link and share it, really get it out there. If you're part of a WhatsApp group, and this is for women who've had a baby in the last 5 years, that's all we need. So some of these might be you. You may have had a baby in the last 5 years. If you have, you can do this. But what you all have contact with here in Indonesia are women who've had a baby in the last 5 years. So if you've got a social media profile or a WhatsApp group with lots of people in it, I want you to get onto this link and share it widely. Let's try and beat the numbers. The numbers we've got to beat so far is Australia, we got 8,890. The next one was Sweden. They beat us. They got about 18,000. But you have a very young childbearing population here in Indonesia. So I think you can even beat that. Let's make Indonesia the biggest, best response. So if you can share that for me, I want to see more phones up looking at the, getting the QR code up there and share it for me. Then this is being led by Diza here at Universitas Airlangga. It's homegrown. We're really proud of it and we want to see some amazing results so that next time it's not me talking on the stage about BEST, but it's Diza telling you all about the Indonesian findings. And that is so important to make the changes that we need to do. So please share that. Who shared it already? Some people, please share it for me. Okay, next slide. And that's me. If you want to follow me, because I will also share the survey, you can follow me on Instagram. That's my Instagram one just there. I'm in the way. I'll get out the way. And we've also got a website, thebirthexperiencestudy.com, where you can see all of the papers I've discussed. You can access them and download them for free, and you can keep a follow on what we're doing. So I know it was a bit of a heavy session from me, and I feel like I should apologize, but to be honest, these are what women are experiencing, and we should just fix the system, and then I won't need to stand up here and share those experiences. So please do share the survey, and I'm ready to answer some questions. Thank you. Sure, sounds like a great idea. Oh, let me just get the... Oops.
Okay. Okay, everyone, hello. Okay. So did anyone in here already have any question or something to discuss about for today's material? Anyone? So there's some rule. First, I'm going to tell you about the rules. Before you ask or statement what is your question is, you need to introduce yourself first so everyone in here know who's going to be asked. Okay? And after that, you can please statement your question. You can do that, right, guys? Yes? Yes? Okay. I think everyone in here was kind of nervous.
Oh, don't be
Okay.
nervous.
So, as I already told you guys, we're going to give you a present. It's a koala from Australia. You can, 6 people is going to be lucky enough to have that. So, please, everyone want to ask the first question? Okay.
Um, First of all, thank you for Dr. Hazel for the wonderful presentation. My name is Farah, and I'm a student of midwifery study program in Erlangga University. I would like to ask a question because as a student of midwife and soon to be midwife, there is no doubt that in the community we will find a lot of people with various backgrounds and also various experiences. And as a midwife, we have to respect a woman's decision, especially about birth or labor. But as a midwife, we also have to apply evidence-based practice. So how do us as a midwife stay in between these two, between respecting a woman's decision and also still doing evidence-based practice? And if, for example, a woman still persists with their decision after we explain the possible complications and possible risk of said intervention or action, how do us as a midwife minimize the possible risk or complication? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's a really good question, a very detailed question. Well done. Yeah, should I answer? Is that okay? Good if I answer, otherwise I might forget my response. Look, that is a dilemma that we have. You know, we want to provide evidence-based care, but sometimes that doesn't match the woman's expectations, and that can be influenced by society, by her family, by her culture. All these different things can change what a woman wants to go for. But at the end of the day, if you use something like that that benefits, risk, alternatives, intuition, and that's where her feelings come in, and the nothing, then it is then down to the woman to make that decision. You know, it's her body. She is going to be the mother of that baby. She will be caring for that baby. And so then even when you've given that information, if she's making a choice that we don't feel is evidence-based or isn't policy-based, doesn't follow our policy, the woman still needs to make that decision. Now, that does sound, though, very idealized, and it's very tricky to maintain that. But this is why we have to keep women's experiences at the heart of everything that we do. You can give the information and make sure that you're giving it in a way that is understood by the woman and by the level that she can understand it. But ultimately, we respect their decisions. And then, you know, if, for example, she's choosing something that makes you feel uncomfortable, if she's birthing, say she's birthing in a hospital anyway, well, you're doing everything you would normally do. You would be monitoring her anyway. I once spoke to an obstetrician because I do a lot of work in the VBAC space. And I said to him, well, do you support women who've had maybe 2 or 3 or 4 cesareans? And he said, well, I should be able to, because we're not going to change how I care for her. She's still going to be on a CTG, like she's still going to be monitored one-on-one by a midwife. And if there are any signs of a uterine rupture or distress, then they'll go to a cesarean. If that's the decision she's made, you're still being cared for in that way. There are some kind of caveats that make us feel quite uncomfortable. What if the women then don't birth in the location we think is safest? But again, it still comes down to the woman's choice, as long as we feel we've given all the information that we can. Yeah. Thank you, though. Oh, let's get a koala.
Maybe for the one who asked can come to the stage. You get the koala. Give applause, guys.
Oh, I think I can reach you down here. Here you go.
Okay, on to the next question. Anyone in here want to ask or have anything to be discussed? Let's go, guys. Guys, this is our chance to know, to get more knowledge about listening woman voice. So everyone in here?
And this koala needs a home.
Yeah, this
Come
koala needs a
on.
mother,
It's really
please.
sad.
Oh my God, please. Untuk teman-teman yang di sini, semua partisipan, kalau mau bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia diperbolehkan. Nanti akan saya bantu untuk translate di bahasa Inggris. Silahkan. Ada yang mau bertanya? Or maybe want to share your experience? I know that everyone in here already at their professional academic thing. So you guys supposed to already became a midwife at some public health facility? Anyone? Anyone? Oh yeah. Iya. Koalanya agak perlu ya, Bu.
Gitu ya. Oke. My name is Yanti. I am a lecturer in midwifery program, Hazel. I want to ask you, several years ago, I am a midwife in Universitas Airlangga Hospital. Then when I to be a lecturer in here, I feel I have a many or much sin, dosa, berdosa ya. I feel guilty. I feel I do many sin when I work for when I to be a midwife in hospital, because when we care the patient is using insurance that paid by government. Then we call it BPJS. But when the patient refuse the some kind of intervention that we provide, they will ditolak itu apa? Refuse to pay by the insurance. But we, as a midwife, we want to provide the best caring for them. But when they feel that they do not want or they refuse the intervention, they will not be paid in by their insurance. What about bagaimana dengan kejadian seperti itu? Padahal kan sebenarnya kita ingin memberikan yang terbaik begitu ya pada pasien. Sedangkan ketika pasien itu menolak, mereka bahkan disuruh pulang gitu-gitu dan tidak dibayar oleh BPJS-nya. Itu yang terjadi pada waktu itu dan mungkin pada saat sekarang pun juga sama. Kalau mereka tidak mematuhi yang kita berikan begitu ya, intervensi yang kita berikan, mereka akan diminta untuk patuh ya, mau tidak mau patuh, atau kalau nggak gitu nggak diklaimkan, nggak di-cover oleh by the insurance gitu. Mohon ditranslatekan ya Didi. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you for Miss Yanti for the question. Please applause first, guys. Okay, so the question that from Miss Yanti is actually about what actually happened in Indonesia. We have like BPJS or the insurance in Indonesia, but for all the mother in here, that if we as a midwife going to give some intervention or medical intervention to her, but when she refused, no, I don't want to get that, no. So the insurance is actually does refuse to pay for anything for her medical. So the insurance is more like, oh, so you doesn't want to follow my rule, so you need to go home. I'm not going to pay anything, any medical intervention for you because you doesn't want to listen to me. So we as a midwife or as a doctor, we can't do anything because the insurance is more like a government. So we can only just follow the rules. And that's what's actually always happening in here. So how about that? We as a midwife really, really want to give the best that we can. Like a mother should giving some medicine, some injection. But when the mother was say no to that intervention, the only thing that we can do is ask her to go home. So in your opinion, how about that?
That's a very challenging situation,
Yes.
isn't it? And I think this is where we need to have midwifery leadership at every single level, because this is a government decision. that the insurance will pay if the woman is complicit to the interventions. However, that decision's been made with, I believe, probably without the influence of midwifery care, to say actually every woman has the right to say no, and that more intervention doesn't mean better outcomes in all scenarios. So, to be honest, that's a challenge, but there you have some amazing midwifery academics, and academia can help in that way, that when you get the evidence out there to show that this is actually what women want and it's important for them, then that needs to be advocated to at a midwifery leadership level. Now in Australia, we don't have that issue, but we have other issues, and we're very excited that now we actually are seeing chief midwives as a position, because it always used to be a chief nurse midwife, and they were often not midwives, at these government positions, advising our health authorities, and they often weren't midwives, but they would use the title chief nurse midwife. But now in New South Wales Health, only in the last month have we ever got our first chief midwife. So that midwife understands midwifery, and I know her, she's an amazing midwife, and now can bring that voice to our state health. And we're hoping that'll go all the way through to our federal government too. So I think, some things it may seem too hard, and they're in the too hard box. We can't change because of that, but midwives can have an impact at every level and every stage. So yeah, dream to and advocate and lobby for those positions. Yeah.
Maybe follow for this case. And how about the mother? Like sometimes it's not only for the government part, but also the mother, because we're already giving like the evidence base, the talking about, no mom, you should take this, but she refused, like really refused. So how as a midwife we need to do for the mother to accept all the intervention that we're trying to give her, like in her best for her?
Well, I guess if the question to ask is why? Why does she not want to have that intervention, and get an understanding of that? It may be due to a previous trauma, like maybe she's saying, maybe you're saying you need to have a vaginal examination, and then she's saying no, but then, well, why? Why not have that conversation about tell me why you don't want to? Can you tell me more about that? And that often we use interventions as gatekeeping, like as, you cannot come in and have this care unless we do this thing to you. And that's kind of not okay. Like a woman should be able to say no. But I think what we often forget to do is we might make a big scene about it. This woman has said no, and then she gets labeled this difficult woman, and everyone's talking about it. She's difficult, get more people to go and talk to her. But no one actually sat down and said, tell me why. What is it that you're scared of? What is it that you say no to? And then you're treating her as an individual, and that can give you the next steps. It might be that you have an alternative instead, and you're able to offer that instead. It might be that she's refusing to birth in a certain position on her bed. Well, then can you offer her something else? So I think once you actually start tapping into the why, not for the use of coercion, but in the way to understand what the issue is and why she's so scared or so adamant at that point. Yeah. Thank you. Great question.
Okay, wow. It's, yeah, the koala. That was a really great question that actually really happened in Indonesia. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Anyone in here want to ask? Yes? Okay. Don't forget to statement your name first, and then statement your question.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Hazel, for such meaningful and insightful knowledge. Let me explain. Let me introduce myself first. You can call me Agisna. I am a second student in midwifery, Airlangga University. I would like to apologize in advance if my English is not very good, and I would like to ask about a recent case involving a woman in Indonesia who has forced to marry the person who had sexually assaulted her after she gave birth to his child.
This situation seems to relate to your explanation earlier about trauma in women. In your opinion, what can be done from a midwife's perspective to help address the trauma experienced by this woman, considering she is being forced into marriage and continues to suffer daily with someone who has deeply harmed her life? Thank you very much.
Explanation about the woman's wrong, it's wrong. So she asked her how we give up on yeah. Is it like because she is not married, but she pregnant and he has yeah. So as a midwife, what we have to do, how we need to give it to. Yeah. Gosh, that's a very complicated question, isn't it? Okay, and this is where, you know, I have to, I guess, show my limitations as a woman from Australia, where being unmarried and pregnant, regardless of how you got pregnant, is not as taboo as it used to be. And there are different options. So we have more options for termination of pregnancy, and for continuing that pregnancy is not seen as so taboo. But I guess, so it's hard for me to answer the question from the Indonesian perspective on how to support that woman. But I would think about, I'd like to jump it forward to say that, you know, if she is, you know, remaining pregnant, going into labor, and you're the midwife, she's disclosed that to you, but you need to support her during labor. How can you support her through that trauma? Because she may well have trauma when it comes to intimate examinations. That is something that you can do as a midwife. And that is around using that trauma-informed lens. And the most important part of a trauma-informed lens is safety. And safety is the key. So it's actually having the conversation of, well, how can I do X, Y, Z? And how can this be made safe for you? So I can give you a bit of an example from my practice. I cared for a woman that I'd never met before during labor. And she was being induced, and she was going really well. And I just came on shift, so I didn't know her at all. And the doctor was wanting to do a vaginal examination on her. Makes sense. She's in labor. She's induced. You know, they want to know. And I saw her. He was kind of like moving her with his body towards the bed, and she just looked shocked, like she just looked terrified. And I recognized that terrified. And I just asked everyone to stop. I asked the doctor, because he was male, I asked him to just leave the room for a minute. I said, can you just leave the room for a minute? Because she just looked so scared. And then she was still standing. I sat on the bed so that I wasn't overpowering her, and sat down and just said, look, I don't need to know what's happened in your past, but I can see that you look really scared right now. Let me give you some options, and let me explain why we want to do an examination, but also what your options are. So I was kind of using the BRAIN acronym before I really knew it very well. And I gave her options of, you know, of why, first of all, we want to do an examination when you're in labor with an induction, and then gave her options of, well, maybe you could sit on this big chair here and your mum could sit behind you and hold you, because she had her mum there as a support person, no partner. And maybe that will make you feel better, or maybe you can do this position or that position. You choose. And then you can choose who does this as well. You can have the doctor do this, or you can have me do this. And then I didn't ask her to make that decision straight away. I then said, but we've got time. You know, you're not about to birth a baby, so we've got time. So then I left the room for her to have that discussion, go back in, and then say, so, like, what would you like to do now? Would you like to do nothing, or, you know, what are your options? And we had these bigger chairs than this, but nice big chairs. And she said, I want my mum to hold me. So she had her mum sitting behind her, holding her. She was sitting down, and she was not completely flat. She's semi-up. And she then asked for me to do the examination, which I did very slowly, telling her what was happening the entire time. And actually, she was fully dilated, and the head wasn't that far away. So I was like, wow, actually, you're doing really great. This is amazing. And able to give her that information. But actually, I then had a disagreement with the doctor, who was really angry that I had asked them to leave the room and had felt that I was now going to cause this labor to be longer than necessary, and, you know, that I shouldn't have done what I did. But then I was able to share, well, she's actually fully dilated. Like there's no problem. She's going to have a baby. And I asked him, did you know what her history is? And he hadn't bothered to look. And then we looked together and we could see this history of sexual assault. And he said, so what? I should still be able to do that whenever I want to do that. And I said, how do you not understand this? Like, how do you not understand what you were doing? But later on, the woman went on and had her baby. And the next day when I saw her on the postnatal ward, her mum actually came up to me and thanked me and said that she felt so powerless in that moment. She wanted to say no to that doctor because she could see her daughter was looking so scared, and her mum knows the whole story, but she couldn't do that at that point. So we often say, just get a support person. They can say no for you. But again, she was powerless and she didn't know what to do. And she was really grateful that we were able to come up with a safety plan and an alternative and options. And that's about staying in control. And when you've been through sexual assault, you've lost every moment of control. So what can we do as midwives to give that control back? And that's often through options and through care and making it a safe space, whatever safety looks like for each woman. So now I say to clinicians, well, why don't you just ask? Before you explain the procedure, go through the brain, use your brain to go through the brain, and then actually give options and say, what would a safe examination look like for you? Here are some ideas, and then give them time. And you might come back and they'll be like, oh, it's absolutely fine. I'm just going to do all the ways you would normally do it. But for some women, you might just be giving them an element of control that they've never had before. I hope that answers some of your question.
Okay, is that answer your question? Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe anyone in here wants to ask something again? Okay, in the back seat. Yes, you.
Hello, my name is Fatin, a student midwife from University Brunei Darussalam. So thank you for sharing your story and experience. It was truly eye-opening to hear how maternity care differs.
I'm sorry, darling. Can you speak louder?
Okay. So I was talking about how eye-opening it was to hear how maternity care differs from our country. And from what I've seen and experienced, care in Brunei tends to be more protocol driven and perhaps less personalized in comparison. So I also like to highlight that in Brunei, episiotomy is mandatory for all first-time mothers as part of our standard obstetric protocol. So with that context in mind, I have two-part question. First, in your opinion, how should midwives in Brunei approach first-time mothers emotionally and communicatively when obtaining consent and providing support for a mandatory episiotomy, particularly when the mothers may be anxious or resistant? And second, do you believe that a mandatory episiotomy policy constitutes an unnecessary medical intervention, or do you see a clinical justification for retaining it as a standard practice?
Thank you. And yeah, we learned a lot from listening to the presentations from your students yesterday. Look, it's very easy for like me to stand here and say this shouldn't happen and this shouldn't happen, but it's so complicated when it is enmeshed in workplace culture and practices. Now, I won't steal some of Hannah's thunder because I know that she's going to discuss this in her presentation about routine episiotomy. So I'll let Hannah do that in her presentation. But I will I guess, reiterate that it's not easy. It's a challenge to even address a big system change, but system change can happen. We've been through it in Australia. Routine episiotomy used to be a routine practice and now it's not. So these things can change, but it takes midwives at all those levels. And so, yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm gonna get Hannah to go into it a bit more because she'll go over the evidence a little bit more. But I think it is trying not to penalize the woman when she wants to say no. That's the important part. If she wants to have the option of not having one, it's how can we still support her? And how can we actually, as clinicians, feel confident? Because just by saying, if we said today, like, you're going to go home and there's no more routine episiotomy, you're going to have a lot of midwives who feel very uncomfortable on, well, what do I do instead? I've got the scissors ready. Like, what do I do? So there has to be like a big cultural shift to bring change. And that also includes the clinicians feeling comfortable and confident on what to do instead. So as a very small example, although it's not quite the same, when I trained in a big tertiary hospital. So for those of you from Australia, you'll know I trained at Nepean. So it was a big hospital, lots of high-risk women. And an active third stage, so, given the syntocinon, and the controlled pull of the cord, that was normal and that is routine at that hospital. And then I moved to a small community hospital as a new graduate midwife. And this hospital is in a very alternative area of Sydney. It's the Blue Mountains, and I lived there for many years. I've just moved. And it's a lot of, I don't even know if you'd get the terms, but a lot of hippies, would you know that term? Like a lot of alternative beliefs, a lot of home birth, and women coming to this small hospital wouldn't want to have an active labour. They would often choose for a physiological third stage. So no drugs and just let it all happen. And the first time that happened, we had 2 birthing rooms and we had 2 women in. And my mentor, I was a brand new baby midwife, she was busy with the other one and she said to me, oh, you've got to do the birth in there, but she wants a physiological third stage. And I said, oh, well, how do I do that? And she said, well, you do nothing. And I said, but how do I do that? Like, I'm so ready to give the jab and get ready and to pull on the cord and get everything ready. And it was a big learning curve for me to actually do nothing. And I think that's a learning curve for when you do water birth as well. It's the best type of birth out there because you kind of, as a midwife, you have to do less and less is more. So it does take a big change to our practice as well. And it takes brave people to go, I'm going to learn a different way. And I'm going to learn to do this in a woman-centered way. So it can't be a change that happens overnight. Hannah's going to address more of the research around it. But I'm just going to address the fact that that takes a lot of cultural change. And it takes brave people to kind of lead that change as well. Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Okay, please come forward. Come front. Okay, you get koala.
You do more of the walking than me, so thank you for coming forward. Any more questions? How many have I got? 2 more koalas left.
Yeah. So it's going to be like 2 more questions, but maybe we use one from the Zoom meeting. So we have a participant in Zoom meeting and she wants to ask, okay, my apologies for reaching out via direct message. I'm currently out of the room and unable to speak directly. My name is Maharani and I'm a midwifery student from Brawijaya. Can we please, next to the question, scroll? Okay. My question is, how does a birth plan serve to amplify women's what?
Voices during childbirth.
Yes. And what strategies can be implemented to ensure it is treated or as a collaborative instrument rather than a mere list of reference that can be disregarded by clinical staff?
That's a great question, and I love talking about birth plans because we actually asked women in our survey, did they make a birth plan? And then we asked them, was your birth plan supported by the clinicians? And so we found that the majority of women did write a birth plan, but for many of them, it wasn't supported by clinicians. And, we hear this a lot. We hear women being almost joked at for having some birth plans, you know, and there'll be some common things that we might hear in Australia. Some sayings could be the longer the birth plan, the longer the cesarean scar, you know, just this kind of belittling of women to say that if they put this effort in to write a birth plan, then we should kind of joke it. But I often think that comes from professionals feeling like they are not going to be able to achieve this, because maybe what is written in a birth plan seems very normal for a woman having a baby, and she wants a physiological, spontaneous rupture of membranes and a spontaneous labor and a vaginal birth, everything that should be really quite achievable. But we're doing that in a system that makes that harder and harder. And so then as a midwife or a doctor looking at this birth plan thinking, well, with our 40% induction rate and our higher cesarean rate, how are we actually going to achieve this? But I think it should be the opposite. I think we should embrace them. But I think we should also see it as an opportunity for a dialogue, an opportunity for communication with Charlie, right? That's speaking. So an opportunity to communicate with women. Because a lot of the women that answered our survey were also aware that things don't always go to plan, and that they were flexible with their birth plans. So we might think, well, this woman wants this vaginal birth and that's all she wants. But actually the women were really aware that they have to be flexible. And this is where we can have those conversations. And it's sometimes maybe it's a plan A or a plan B, like what's most important to you if you do need to have emergencies. And there's a few different ways that can be done. So obviously continuity helps because you know that woman throughout her whole journey. But even if you don't have that continuity, in the clinic, in antenatal clinic, you can have this conversation. You can say, have you written a birth plan yet? Should we have a chat about it? And then also say, I'm sure you understand birth is not always one way, and there may be different ways that your birth may go. Have you thought about what's really important to you if you need to have a cesarean, for example? Now, I did write about this in detail in my first 2 books, which I know are in English, not in Bahasa Indonesian. But there's also lots of different ways you can do this. In Australia, we have an amazing researcher who's done something called the birth map. And in my books, I talk about some art therapy that you can use where women draw their ideal birth and then they draw their worst case birth and then they draw their worst case made better. So you end up with a plan A and a plan B. The actual getting clinicians to be more respectful, that's on to the clinicians, that's not down to the women. And I think we need to then understand that when we are dismissing a birth plan, we're actually dismissing a woman. We're almost saying to the woman, we don't think you're smart enough to be able to write what you want. We don't think you understand birth well enough. And I'm the boss, so therefore we'll just stick to my plan, not yours. So we have to think about the communication and the language that we're using and what we're really saying to women when we're dismissing or refusing to engage with their birth plan.
Okay, so
I'll send you a virtual koala.
yeah, yeah, we can't send you the koala, but maybe the picture of the koala. Okay, so for Maharani, thank you for the question from Zoom meeting. Is there anyone in Zoom meeting maybe want to ask again? Can you please scroll that? Oh no, no one? Or maybe can we like saw in a Zoom meeting? Maybe someone in Zoom meeting want to say hi or statement their question. One more for one more question. Oh, but in here we have yeah, we have another question in here.
Okay, let's do
Okay, so let's just do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
Oh, two more, I guess.
We can do, yeah, if we've got time.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for the time that has been given to me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jana, a student of the RPL program at Airlangga University. I'm very interested in the topic of VBAC. In Indonesia, I see that there are still many pros and cons regarding the implementation of VBAC, both among healthcare providers and healthcare facilities. Therefore, I would like to ask, what is the speaker's perspective on the opportunity to implement VBAC in Indonesia today, and what important factors should healthcare providers consider to ensure that VBAC can be conducted safely for both the mother and the baby? Thank you.
Thank you.
So summarize that for me.
Okay, so it's actually I want to tell you something. It's actually our topic for last year about VBIC. So the question is, in Indonesia, VBIC is more like still has lots of pros and cons. Even and a lot of mother are actually not doing that because in here it's still, I don't know, maybe not really don't really happen, I guess, because in here the statement was if you already doing like a first cesarean, you're going to do it again for your next pregnant. So what is your opinion? How to implement that to happen in here, the VBAC? That's it.
Well, I think you can still see my webinar from last year. So that will take you into a deep dive onto women's experiences of VBAC and how important it is for them. And also just having options after having a previous cesarean. Look, what I found is that there are 4 things that we can kind of focus on. One is knowing the evidence and using it to, I guess, empower women rather than frighten women. So understanding that a uterine rupture rate is very low and that most women can go on and have a safe vaginal birth and that most women go on and feel very positive about their birth experiences. But there is that there is the confidence, the lack of confidence that certainly is in clinicians. Again, like I mentioned before, just bringing in a change makes it very challenging. So one of the things I've done in Australia, because still the majority, over 80% of women with a previous cesarean will go on to have another cesarean next time. So we're still fighting this. We've still got, about 12% VBAC rate in Australia. So we're not there yet. But what I'm trying to do, and what I've done in my publications, is actually to try and increase the confidence of both the women, first of all, and then the women, and then the midwives and the doctors. And so I'm traveling around Australia doing workshops with midwives and doctors and doulas and trying to get their encouragement and confidence up. And at the heart of that is understanding why it's important for women to have choice. And that's really what my whole PhD was. Like, what were the experiences of women and why was it so good for them? But that is also why I know a lot about obstetric violence and birth trauma, because many women were given, coercion was used on them to not have VBAC as an option. And honestly, I think one of the things that clinicians need to do is listen to the stories of women, especially those that have had a VBAC, because there is so much power and so much excitement. And I get contacted, weekly still by women in Australia who want to share their VBAC story with me, and that they may have read the book and they found that really helped them. And so they increased their confidence and they increased their knowledge, and then they found a midwife that was really supportive of it, and then they felt so good afterwards. So if you keep that to the heart, but feel free to watch the previous webinar, because I haven't got enough time to go into all of my pearls of wisdom. But I will say in the second book that I wrote, I actually have Indonesian women's stories in there, Indonesian midwives' stories. So I partnered with Ruang Bidan, and they got some midwife stories from across Indonesia, and I put them in the back of the book. So yeah, if you're able to get a copy of that, it's in English, but you can hear from midwives in Indonesia who are supporting women to have a VBAC.
Yeah. Okay, is that answer your question? Yes, okay. Please confirm. You can get your koala. Okay, I'm going to say thank you for all the participants that actually enthusiastic to follow Hazel material for today. But I'm so sorry because we are actually going to need to go into the next session. So the Q&A session is I'm going to close the Q&A session for now. But after this, we're going to hearing next material from Professor Hannah. So please, for anyone in here that have question, take a note first. So maybe I want to say thank you for Hazel because giving a really good material. And maybe you want to say something to anyone in here?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. In the next webinar, I'm going to look at, really what we can do, what our solutions are from the woman's perspective. And I know it's been some tough topics today, so maybe do something kind to yourself today because you've been hearing a lot about trauma and violence, and it can be very difficult to hear. So my little advice for you is to do a bit of self-care this afternoon. Go and do something nice for yourself, and remind yourself of all the positive experiences that women have as well. But thank you for listening to me today.
Okay, once again, Hazel, please give big applause. Okay, for the next topic, we're going to have Professor I'm sorry. Okay, so for the next question, we have Professor Hannah Dahlen as a Professor of Midwifery, Associate Dean Research and Higher Degree Research, School of Nursing and Midwifery, Western Sydney University. Hello, Professor Hannah. Everyone can say hi? Okay, so do you want to just start the Okay, so without further ado, I give the floor and the time from Professor Hannah. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Salam alaikum. It's so lovely to be here and to see you all. Now, that was a wonderful long session, and Hazel and I are like the yin and the yang. So she's very wonderful with the qualitative, and I'm going to look more at the policies and the systematic reviews and the evidence. But before we do that, I want you all to stand up, because otherwise you'll all be snoring in my talk, and that is not a good look. Stand up. I want you to reach for the sky and wiggle around. Yes. And then I want you to jump up and down on the ground and wake your bodies up. Come on. Come on. Get the blood moving. Excellent. Dizza, that's how you do it. Excellent. And then I want you to turn to the person next to them, and I want you to say to them, "You're fabulous." Yeah? Fantastic. Okay. You can all sit down, and we're going to start the next session. So I'm going to talk to you today about reducing unnecessary interventions in childbirth. I want to look particularly at the high-level evidence and also some of the research that we've undertaken as well. So next slide, please. So let's start by looking at the world. Let's have a little look at where we are in the world right now. WHO has reiterated again in the recent intrapartum care guidelines for a positive birth experience that when used appropriately, obstetric intervention saves lives. So I'm not here to say all intervention is bad. It is not. We don't want to go back 300 years when so many women died and babies died. We want to be able to use that skill in a way that leads to better outcomes, but not use it when it's not needed. When it's overused, though, it causes harm without benefit. So if we look globally, cesarean sections are around 21%, but remember that takes rates of 5% in sub-Saharan Africa, which is far too low, to rates of over 70% in South American countries. Big range. I believe in Indonesia that rate also ranges. Some of your private hospitals have very high rates, yes? And some of your public less. My rate in Australia now is over 40%. It's a very high rate. 25% of labours are induced in high-income countries. In my country, that's now a third. And if it's your first baby, it's over 40% have an induction. The rate of episiotomy in some health systems is as high as 75%, and we're going to discuss that a little bit today. In my country, that rate was 14% 10 years ago and has now increased to 24% in just 10 years, after many years of us bringing the rate down. And between 30 and 35% of women report birth trauma globally, as Hazel has talked so well about this morning. So what are the problems of over-medicalization? They increase maternal morbidity. They increase hemorrhage, infection, venous thrombus embolism, surgical injuries. They increase neonatal complications like respiratory distress, like NICU admissions, like iatrogenic prematurity, which is now becoming a major cause of the premature birth numbers. So what do I mean by iatrogenic? That means things we do to make the labor happen. And so more and more babies are being born early because we are inducing them or doing early cesareans. And it disrupts the birth, it disrupts the physiology and the microbiome. And I'm going to talk very briefly about the microbiome and epigenetics. It interferes with early bonding and skin to skin and breastfeeding initiation. Of course, that birth trauma is really important. And it increased healthcare costs with no improvement in outcomes. And it impacts on the next birth. And I spent so much of my career researching what was happening in this birth. And I'll probably end my career by researching what happens with the first birth and then all the way through the woman's life through to her menopause and beyond. How does that life course affect her? Next slide, please. So there is a fantastic paper I encourage everybody to read. This is a Lancet publication from a few years ago now by Suzanne Miller and the Lancet team, and it's titled Beyond Too Much, Too Late, Too Little, Too Soon. So beyond that, we need to move beyond too little, too soon, too much, too late. Now in Indonesia, I know you have both extremes, don't you? Perhaps in the islands and in some places, women are not getting that care early enough, and it's leading to poor outcomes. But in your big city hospitals, am I right? Is there too much happening too soon with intervention? Yes. So it's about how do we get the balance right? And in this paper, which reviews 51 high-quality systematic reviews to come out with the top recommendations, Miller and her authors say that too little, too late is where you have absent, delayed, or inadequate care, and that is linked to insufficient resources. It's insufficient staff or skilled staff, lack of supplies, lack of medicines, and lack of infrastructure. I'm sure all of these things are familiar with you in Indonesia, correct? But in our country, we also have this with our Aboriginal remote communities. So this is not just a problem for low and middle income countries. The care can be withheld sometimes, punishing women if they don't do what we want, or making women be frightened that if they come in, they will be coerced, so they don't come in. Maybe the women want to seek out the village midwife because they get more compassion and kindness from them and not seek out the professional care that they may feel is not as understanding. It primarily, yes, affects low and middle income countries, but it also affects disadvantaged populations in all countries. So First Nations people like Aboriginal women, migrant, refugee women, and it's directly associated with high maternal mortality and morbidity. So too little, too late kills mothers and babies. But too much, too soon is becoming a huge problem in countries like mine. We have routine over-medicalization of normal pregnancy and birth. We have unnecessary use of non-evidence-based interventions. We also have a rapid problem with more and more women moving into facility-based births. Now, I kind of always give this message when I come to Indonesia: don't do what we've done. Please don't do what we've done. So we got rid of home birth. If you look at what happened in the UK in the 1970s, there was just basically a law that came out from a man called Lord Peel, who decided home birth wasn't a good idea. And he just basically said there'll be no more home birth, everyone birth in hospital. And then years later, they actually showed the maternal mortality, infant mortality went up as a direct result of that move. I get so worried when I see people seeing birth at home or with midwives in the community as a problem. It is not a problem. It is the best place for women who are low risk, with seamless services that move them on to the next level. So please don't do what we have done. And if we do too much too soon, we also increase costs, etc. So what is recommended now at top level evidence? A skilled birth attendant being present. And that's you midwives. You are the answer. Skilled birth attendants. A companion of choice during labor. Do all women in Indonesia get to bring in somebody they want to the labor and birth? That's wonderful. That is so wonderful. Being mobile and upright, getting women off the bed. I often put up a slide, I haven't got it today, with a bed there and a big cross through it. The bed is one of the things that stops women having physiological birth. Immediate skin-to-skin post-birth, breastfeeding within the first hour, active management of third stage. Now, when you have women who have had a lot of intervention or have low hemoglobin, have increased risk of decompensating with hemorrhage, active third stage saves lives. So it's something that in Indonesia, I'm sure that you see a lot of, where women are very, very well off, healthy, have no risk factors, and they want to make a choice not to have that. We also know the outcomes are very good if done correctly. But we do know active third stage reduces hemorrhage. Corticosteroids for preterm birth and magnesium sulfate for preeclampsia. Those are some of the top things that save lives. But what should we not do? Routine episiotomy. Routine enema on admission in labor. That is not done in Indonesia anywhere, is it? Routine enema still? To make the bowels open? No, everyone's looking blank, so that's good. Routine electronic fetal monitoring. We should not have monitors on women who are low risk. Routine shaving of pubic area. Lying on a bed. Birthing on your back. Being in lithotomy. Routine cannulation. Withholding fluid and foods, and separating the mother and the baby within the first hour after birth. Those are the things we should not do. These are the things that we should do. Next slide, please. I want to talk about, well, okay, we know about the morbidity, we know about the mortality, but what other things could be an effect? Epigenetics is a real interest of mine. And epigenetics and birth intervention is something that we have now published a few papers on it. And epigenetics is how, it's the study of how genes are turned on and off without, of course, changing the underlying DNA. So you inherit half your DNA from your mother, half your DNA from your father, but there are little chemical tags on your DNA that either get activated and respond or silenced. When they're silenced, we call that DNA methylation. And if we're silencing parts on our DNA that's to do with immune response, or we're hyperactivating them, we can end up seeing things like asthma, obesity, diabetes, etc. So these changes are made with the protein structures. They can be inherited across generations. So if your grandmother smoked, did you know this? If your grandmother smoked, you have epigenetic changes in your body. We carry through the generations and pass on these epigenetic changes, which is really significant when we come and talk about birth. And these can cause things like altered immune function, weight and metabolism, neurological development, though I just want to be really careful about this. Autism and ADHD, particularly autism, very complicated. So I'm not going to say that that's caused by cesarean section, even though some initial studies have shown some link. I think it's far too complicated. And also that this can be passed on transgenerationally. Next slide, please. So we developed the EPIC hypothesis back in 2012. We published several papers after that with an international team. And we came up with a hypothesis. And our EPIC hypothesis was that physiological labor and birth exert what's called eustress, healthy positive stress on the fetus, programming that epigenome for an optimal immune response, which encourages appropriate immune reactions, weight regulation, and extrauterine adaptation. But if you have too little stress, elective cesarean section with no labor, Then you can have an alteration in that epigenetic programming that may be disrupted, and you might have an immune system that is underprimed, which is why we see more things like asthma, diabetes, etc. with cesarean. Eustress is when a normal labor and birth occurs physiologically because there's a balance in stress leading to healthy microbiome seeding and epigenetic priming for long life health. Distress is when too much is going on, induced, syntocin, and instrumental birth. And that extra stress can cause an overactivation and an immune dysregulation. Are you all with me? So labor and birth is a full-on thing, isn't it? People say it's like a high-level athlete when you give birth. And people say, oh, poor woman. Yes, I've been there. But what that body is doing in unison with that baby is priming some very important genes and messages to be switched on. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. What about the microbiome? That's now on everybody's lips, isn't it? You know we have a microbiome desert, our skin. We have a microbiome forest, our pubic hair, our hair on our bodies. We have a microbiome swamp. Where's your swamp? Your vagina, your gut. The vagina's microbiome changes several times through pregnancy. Did you know that? And in the last few weeks before the baby comes, there is a whole change in the proteins that are in the vagina and the microbes that come down to sit there, waiting to greet your baby. And what happens when your baby comes through your vagina? I always say they're like a little Dyson Hoover. They're licking away. You know they're licking away. They come out and they're licking away. And they're having their first microbiome seeding. They're swallowing, they're ingesting. We now know the placenta is not sterile. We have discovered there is a microbiome in the placenta. Fascinating stuff. So that baby comes out primed and ready with a desert, a swamp, and a forest. Okay. So what happens when some of those things are disrupted? So we know that the vagina coats that baby in the bacteria. We know that they colonize in the baby's gut and establish that microbiome. We know cesarean section babies have lower numbers of key bacterial strains. We know intrapartum antibiotics, and now over 50% of women in Australia have antibiotics during labor. Massive hit that the baby gets within 3 to 4 minutes. Massive, massive hit of antibiotics. We know that that disrupts microbiome seeding. We know that disrupted microbiome is associated with allergies, asthma, diabetes, and obesity, something we're seeing more and more and more of. And we know that breastfeeding additionally provides another microbiome. So you all know that in colostrum are non-digestible proteins, non-digestible elements, which everybody thought, well, why are they there when we can't digest them? They're simply there to feed the microbiome. That's why you have colostrum. That's why it's so important women get colostrum. So some of the outcomes that could be linked to the disruption are the allergies, the eczema, the asthma, the diabetes, the metabolic syndromes, inflammatory bowel disease, and infections in early childhood. Let's move on now to some research that we've done. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we did a study which we published last year where we looked at 172,000 women who gave birth in New South Wales, having their first baby and being low risk. So we took them all low risk. You would expect good outcomes generally. We then followed those same women through who had their second baby. So 131,000 of them went on to have another baby, and another 44,600 went on to have a third baby. And we kept following them through to see what happens with your first birth that affects your subsequent births. What do we find? If you have a normal birth, a normal vaginal birth, 91.3% have another one. and even more, have a third one. If you have an elective cesarean section, your probability of a second one is 81.9%. If you have an elective cesarean section, your VBAC is 4.6%. And if you have a VBAC after an emergency cesarean section, that's an only 9% rate. And we found that if you have your baby in a private hospital, those outcomes are much lower and worse. So your first birth, and we talked a bit about this in our research meeting yesterday with the STAR, your first birth sets up a pattern that pretty much predicts your reproductive history, unless you have very good advocacy and you make choices. So we have to get the first birth right. We have to see the primate as an endangered species where we should put all of our investment in supporting. Next slide, please. So what's the implication of this? We then did another study, which we published in 2018, looking at 500,000 births, and then linking the data to all the admissions that child had from those mothers to 5 years of age. Any admission to hospital we studied. And we found that babies who had a forceps or vacuum following an induction or augmentation had the highest risk of jaundice and feeding problems and being readmitted within the first 28 days for those issues. We found babies who were born by cesarean section had high rates of being cold and needing treatment in hospital compared to those who were born by vaginal birth. That's not too surprising, is it? Though skin to skin could sort much of this out. We found babies born by cesarean, by emergency cesarean had one of the highest rates of metabolic disorders, such as diabetes and obesity by 5. And we found that respiratory infections like bronchitis, pneumonia, metabolic disorders, and eczema were higher amongst children who had any birth intervention other than a spontaneous vaginal birth. Now, I'm not saying these are causal factors, but they are associated. There is something going on here. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the things that we might need to think about reducing. Unnecessary induction of labor, which has gone up high. Same in Indonesia, induction is going higher and higher and higher. So what are some of the evidence-based strategies to reduce induction? We know membrane sweeping after 38 weeks, particularly from 41 weeks, is effective in reducing the need to be induced, and it's safe and cost effective. But we can't just do it. We must have a conversation with women, because some women say, I don't want that, and that is their choice. We know that we should not be inducing women before between 41 and 42 weeks for being overdue. We know that that is the WHO recommendation. And we know that we can monitor women before that to make sure we capture those who are more likely to have adverse outcomes. We know we need shared decision making, and I have a student at the moment studying this for their honours, and they're going on to their PhD. How do we talk to women so that they share that decision making? Hazel presented some of our research that was led by one of a wonderful previous PhD student of mine who's now a postdoc fellow, Simone Ormsby. We know the trauma side, and we've just got a paper we're about to submit where we have shown that induction of labour is associated with double the birth trauma to spontaneous vaginal birth. Outpatient cervical ripening, I don't know if this happens in Indonesia, but sending women home and doing it in the outpatients also has equivalent safety. And also making sure we audit and look at why are we doing things? Why are we doing what we're doing, regularly reviewing and improving? And what shouldn't we recommend? We should not be inducing for macrosomia alone. How many babies are induced because they're told the baby is big? The Big Baby study that was published last year, they did ultrasounds and then induced randomly based on the ultrasound showing a big baby. 60% of the babies were not big. It's so inaccurate. GBS colonization without risk factors, not a reason to induce. Maternal requests before 39 weeks has to be thought of very carefully and discussed with women because of the increase in NICU admissions. Please do not be inducing women for big babies based alone on an ultrasound, which is highly inaccurate. And also previous cesarean section is not an indication for induction. It's not saying you can't have an induction with a previous cesarean, but in fact, I think we handicap women when we do that. We make it more likely they're not going to succeed and they increase the rupture risk. Next slide, please. So how do we reduce unnecessary cesarean sections? Again, we have some really good evidence around this. What do we need to recommend? Feedback. And Hazel's talked about that this morning. The uterine rupture risk between 0.2 and 0.5%. It's manageable with monitoring. ECV for breech babies. Turning the baby between 36, 37 weeks reduces breech by 50%. Delay in second stage, such a common reason that people do cesareans. And when is the most dangerous cesarean to be done? Do you know? Second stage. Why? Has anyone been underneath the drapes in a cesarean like I have, pushing the baby back up? Because it's so far down, the doctor can't get the baby out. That is the worst time to do a cesarean section. It's the greatest risk. And it should not be done for delay before 3 hours for a first-time mother or 2 hours for a subsequent mother, as long as the baby's okay. And we also need to, again, do review and audit of all decisions so that we reduce the cesarean section rate. So not doing cesareans for big babies, not doing cesareans for maternal requests before 39 weeks, avoiding a repeat cesarean for all, and also avoid early admission into the ward. We know the earlier women come in, the more we do to them. So let's keep them at home with lots of support. Next slide, please. How do we reduce unnecessary augmentation of labour? What we should not do. Now, WHO has come out with, based on some very extensive research, active phase of labour does not begin till 5 to 6 centimetres. How many times? We shouldn't be putting women on a partogram before 5 to 6 centimetres. The moment we put them on a partogram, we all feel we need to do something. Partograms are for established labour. So, number one, do not augment women before 5 to 6 centimetres because they're not in labour. Number two, routine amniotomy to speed labours up doesn't reduce caesarean section rates, is not recommended. Slow labour, again, if the partograph alert line is crossed, it doesn't mandate clinical intervention. It increases our vigilance. And we have to be very mindful of excessive oxytocin dose escalation. I do lots of legal case reviews, and the majority are due to bad things that have happened through the misuse of oxytocin. So what do we need to do to augment appropriately? Delay for more than 4 hours before diagnosing active phase delay. Non-pharmacological measures first, or hydration, mobilization, good support. Amniotomy, if it's going to be done, there is probably some evidence to say, unless there are multip, that also the oxytocin going with that can help, but you shouldn't be doing it without a very good reason. And evidence-based protocols where you start very low and you increase very gradually, because it's such a risky drug for the baby and the mother. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about episiotomy. So I said, you know, in some countries, episiotomy rate is 75%. When I started training in the United Kingdom back in the late 80s, episiotomy rates were high, but we'd also just had Jennifer Sleep's study. We'd also had Michael Klein publishing papers that showed that there was no reduction in trauma. There was an increase in trauma and an increase in pain with an increase in episiotomy. And so we dramatically reduced our episiotomy rate, which, as I said, is now starting to climb back up. So what is the level 1 evidence, the top evidence in the world? From 21 randomized controlled trials of 15,000 women, episiotomy causes, restricting it leads to 30% less posterior perineal trauma. That's incredible. Restricting it leads to less suturing, 30% less. Restricting it leads to fewer healing complications at day 7. There is no evidence that routine episiotomy protects the pelvic floor or the perineum. And if you're going to do one, do a medial lateral, not a midline, because that increases your severe perineal trauma. So what can we do if we haven't got the episiotomy, if we're trying to reduce that? What can we do? Well, warm compresses, and I'll talk a bit more about that. We did the first trial in the world on warm compresses and showed it halved severe perineal trauma. Perineal massage, which the woman does herself from 34 to 36 weeks. Upright positions as well, less than lithotomy in particular. Slow control of the emergence of the baby's head. And that might be a woman who's breathing that baby out beautifully slowly, or a woman who might be really, really distressed that you need to put some pressure on. There's actually no evidence of benefit for doing it as needed as opposed to routinely holding your hand on the head. And then education and training and avoiding episiotomy for all instrumental birth. More and more evidence that with forceps is a good idea, not so necessary for vacuum. Next slide, please. Warm packs. As I said, I did this trial. This was my PhD back in 2007. And it followed me being a midwife in England, where I saw them being used everywhere. Came back to Australia, walked down the corridor with my bowl of hot water, and the midwives all freaked out. What the hell are you doing? Occupational safety. What about the hot water? And they all thought I'd sacrificed a goat on the labour ward floor or something. It was like, and I couldn't believe it. I'd just been doing this all the time. But they did say one very good thing to me. Where is your evidence? So being Hannah, I set out to do the world's largest randomized controlled trial. We had 717 first-time mothers, and we showed that warm pack, a warm compress, 300 hot water boiling, 300 cold out of a tap. That's all it is. Not sterile, not fancy. You can use a warm cloth. You can use a peri pad. Reduced severe perineal trauma by 50%. But even also more important was pain was reduced postpartum and incontinence at 3 months. And when we asked women and midwives what they thought, 79.7% of women said that they felt reduced pain. 80% of midwives said that they saw reduced pain. 85.7% said that they wanted to have it next birth, and 92.6% of midwives plan to use it after seeing its effect routinely. Next slide, please. That's just hot water, and it's that easy. You can do it in any position. You soak it. You do it between you do it when the contraction's on, and then when the contraction stops, you take it off, put it back in the bowl. You wait for the next one, you squeeze it out, and you put it back on. Next slide, please. Right. We then, because after many years since I did my trial, several more were done. So we published a meta-analysis back in 2019 of 7 randomized controlled trials of warm packs. We showed by then that it led to significantly higher intact perineum, significantly fewer 3rd degrees, significantly fewer 4th degrees, and significantly less episiotomy. So it's now recommended by WHO and all of the guidelines as a simple, low-cost intervention. Next slide, please. The other thing I think warm packs do is if you cover it up, you don't freak out. So you know when midwives are watching perineums and they're going, oh my God, is it going to explode? Is it going to tear? Oh my God. I published a paper from my PhD called From Social to Surgical, where I traced back the way we spoke about women's perineums all the way back to Hippocrates' days. And I showed that when women were upright and squatting, our language was very different. The moment we lay women on their backs and looked at it, and the medicalization of birth occurred, we saw the perineum as this dangerous, potentially exploding area of a woman. And when you put a warm pack on, you cover that up and you stop freaking out. What about pelvic floor exercises? Well, one of my PhD students published a paper in 2020. It's now been recommended by our government in our guidelines. We looked at 16 studies, 2,800 women, and we found that if you do antenatal exercises, pelvic floor, antenatally, that you reduce the second stage of labor, that you reduce severe perineal trauma, that you reduce that you have no impact on normal vaginal, cesarean, instrumental, and episiotomy rate, but you reduce severe perineal trauma most significantly. There was some varying trial qualities, so again, we need to do bigger studies. Next slide, please. Okay, let's now talk about, I always say the baby is part of the birth. So we're not going to stop about unnecessary interventions by forgetting there's a baby at the end of it. When that baby is born, skin to skin, keeping the mother and the baby together. Is that a fairly standard thing in Indonesia? Skin to skin. Yes. Great. You're way ahead of some places. What about in cesarean section? Is that a very standard thing in Indonesia? Skin to skin? Some places. Some places. Yeah, that's the bit we need to get better, because if I take you back to the epigenetics and the microbiome, there's a lot we can do by getting that baby onto the mother's chest. We know the cortisol levels of babies born by cesarean are low. And you might think, well, that's a good thing. No one wants high cortisol. Actually, you do. Because babies born by vaginal birth have very high cortisol, as do their mothers, and it leads to that connection, the switching on the smell, the connection stuff, the alertness. So putting a baby skin to skin with a mother increases their cortisol, which more simulates what happens with a normal vaginal birth. So we're not just getting connection, we're not just increasing breastfeeding, but we are starting to have an impact on the disturbances of the microbiome and the epigenetics. So we know that there's more breastfeeding success. We know it regulates the baby's temperature. We know it leads to better infant bonding. We know that it reduces hypothermia. We know it reduces hypoglycemia. We know that it's also a very good thing to do if we have to do painful procedures on a baby. So we need to stop routinely removing babies. We don't need to check them within the first few minutes. Keep that baby with the mother and do nothing for the first hour. Delay that routine weighing and things until after the first feed. Keep babies and mothers together. And also more, do you do kangaroo care in Indonesia with sick babies? Yeah? Yes. Fantastic. You are brilliant. You need to come to Australia and speak to us. Next slide, please. And what about early breastfeeding? This is all part of it. And early breastfeeding is the end of the cascade. If you have a cascade of normal, breastfeeding usually goes really well. If you have a cascade of abnormal, you need to generally support women a lot more. I worked as a private midwife for 10 years doing majority home births. And in that entire time, and I would have them from the moment they were pregnant, be at the births, catch their babies, and then do 6 weeks postnatal. Not one woman was not exclusively breastfeeding at 6 weeks in 10 years. Not one baby got transferred for jaundice in 10 years. You just didn't see it, because if you kept it all normal, it all went normal all the way down into that last bit. So BFHI, are most hospitals in Indonesia BFHI accredited? Some. So we know that does increase breastfeeding rates. Skin to skin immediately after birth for that first hour at least. Skilled support for the first latch so we don't end up with mothers with blistered nipples and problems. Don't separate unless a clinical emergency. Antenatal education so women are ready and understand about hand expressing and things. And peer support. I got to say, this is something I think you guys do so well. Your cadres would probably help a lot with this, I imagine. The cadre support, the community support, the support of other women. Really, really important. Next slide, please. So reducing birth trauma. Now, I won't go into the psychological one so much because Hazel's done a fantastic job of that. But we know that PTSD affects around 4 to 6% of women. And we know that that is higher where the birth experience is not what they wanted, where they had poor communication. We know that respectful trauma-informed care leads to less birth trauma. We know continuity of midwifery care. We just published a paper a few weeks ago that showed that the rate of birth trauma, if you had continuity of midwifery care compared to fragmented care, was half. That's when you control for everything that happens that might be different. Debriefing and birth afterthoughts, again, really important. But women have the opportunity to talk and having that birth preferences and shared decision-making. Preventing severe perineal trauma, we know warm compresses, slow birth of the baby, slow delivery of the show. One of the things I noticed early in my career, I used to keep statistics. Of course I did, because I love statistics. Kept statistics on all my births, and I'd analyze them every 100 births, and I would think, what's changed? And I noticed that I was getting a lot of trauma with the shoulders. And so I became very concentrated on the next 100 birth of being very careful to really protect the posterior shoulder and the posterior arm. Slid my hand down because I saw the elbow doing that. Yeah, the old elbow flick. Yes. And I just really concentrated on that, and I halved my rate of perineal trauma. So shoulders, it's not over when the head's out. It's only over when the toes are out, right? And the shoulders, some of them can have big Australian football shoulders that need a little help. Shoulder dystocia, managing shoulder dystocia, appropriately using helper mnemonic. Neonatal birth injury, instrumental birth, no more than 3 pulls on a vacuum or forceps without descent. I have seen babies' entire scalps lifted off with a vacuum. And eventually when this was happening, I actually went, it was the old days when we had the suction for the vacuum on the wall. Now we have the pumps. I went to the wall and I disconnected the suction. And I said, you stop now. Uterine rupture with VBAC, again, if we can monitor women closely, if we don't intervene, if we support them, we will have less ruptures occur. And also with perineal wound. Now, I did a big study many years ago where I looked at the evidence. There's no evidence for routine swabbing and draping during birth. Birth's not sterile. In fact, you want that microbiome. But when you suture, yes, it should be. So using chlorhexidine when birth is being sutured is a good thing to prevent breakdown. Next slide, please. System things, audit and benchmarking. Really important that we look at why, what are the rates, what's going on, what can we change? Tracking data helps us improve. Continuity of midwifery care. We know it leads to less cesarean section, improved satisfaction, and it should be able to be scaled to all women, not just low-risk women. Respectful maternity care standards to set a zero tolerance for disrespect and abuse. Clinical governance guidelines, BFHI, education and training. These are some of the system level changes we can make. Next slide, please. So a summary, just in case you're all going, whoa, it's nearly lunchtime. What the hell has she been talking about? Take a picture of this slide. This is where the strong evidence is. That sweeping of the membranes to reduce induction. Continuous support, continuity of midwifery care, and VBAC and ECV reduce cesarean section. Don't augment before 5 to 6 centimeters. And really be cautious about when you do it and what you consider delay. Restrict episiotomy. So the rate WHO recommends is 10%. We're over it. Perhaps Indonesia is over it as well, over that rate. Antibiotics. GBS is an interesting thing. We might talk more about it in the next seminar because the evidence is split between whether you routinely give antibiotics or you don't, whether you give them on risk or whether you give them routinely. Mother-baby separation, we should not be doing it as much as we can, early breastfeeding, and also considering birth trauma. And these are all the documents, world documents that support this. Next slide, please. So every intervention avoided when not needed is care given. Sometimes as midwives and doctors, we feel if we don't do anything, we're not giving care. You know, one of the hardest lessons I had as a 20-year experienced clinical midwife consultant who was an expert in delivery ward, who could cannulate in her sleep and suture in the dark and manage everything, was when I moved to doing home births, I did not know how to sit still and just be quiet. I had to unlearn that. Care given is not intervention. It's when it's needed that you implement that. Normal birth is physiological and protect it unless evidence demands otherwise. Informed consent, shared decision-making, and respectful care are non-negotiable. This is where we get our lawyers involved, because these are human rights violations to say to women, you must do that or I will withhold this. Every unnecessary intervention has a cost to the woman, to the baby, and the system, and the goal should be the right care to the right woman at the right time. We have, I think in Indonesia, you have an excellent primary healthcare tiered system. Seriously, if the Dutch gave you one good thing, other than your love of cheese that I do notice, I do notice cheese on everything, even on trifle. One thing they gave you that was very good is that primary healthcare tiered system. Hold on to it and protect it with your lives. That means birth in the community with your amazing private midwives when it's normal. Birth in the puskesmas when maybe there are some intermediate things that need a bit more attention. Birth in the hospital when there is risk. Let's stop seeing hospital as the answer. There's actually some fantastic Indonesian data that shows some of the worst outcomes are in the hospitals for the low-risk women. Next slide, please. Continuity of midwifery care. We will talk more about that next time. But continuity midwifery care is one of the most powerful interventions that you can ever implement into care. Warm packs, avoiding, again, these are just listing. I want to get these top 6 things in your minds. Next slide, please. If anybody has not read this book by our wonderful GP, Sarah Buckley, and you really want to be sitting in awe over what happens in a woman's body and why we shouldn't intervene, read this book. It's freely available online. The Hormonal Physiology of Childbearing is the best collection of what goes on in the body and why we need to stop disturbing it that I've ever read. It's absolutely brilliant. And next slide, please. This is what comes out. They've got pathways. This is called the path, how to stay on the pathway to physiological birth. The right care provider and the right place for the right woman, supporting women, limiting stress, spontaneous labor, stay home as long as possible, stay calm and relaxed, use comfort measures, stay upright and move around, stay calm and relaxed again. They keep on saying that. Stay skin to skin with the baby, breastfeed after birth, limit distractions, stay calm and focused on being with your baby in the days following birth. These are so simple, but they're so powerful. Next slide, please. Next slide. And again. I just want you to think about the difference between these two pictures. So often our birth units look like this one over here. But a simple strategy can change the way a woman feels when she walks into your environment. What kind of environment do we set up for women that makes them think of surgery and drama, or, oh, I'm in a beautiful place where I will be cared for? Next slide. And again, thank you. How can we transform our birth environments? How can we get more equipment to get women off the bed? How can we learn to do massage and acupressure and all the things that can support women? And also, what about our language? Do we say delivery or do we say giving birth? Do we say you're only 3 centimeters or do we say fantastic, you're 3 centimeters? How different is it? Do we say, wow, you've got a big baby, or do we say you are growing such a healthy baby? Do we talk about pain relief or do we talk about working with pain? Do we talk about labour wards or do we talk about birth suites or birth centres? Do we say women refused or do we say they've declined that? Do we talk about women as patients, therefore putting into place that medical model rather than as women? Next slide, please. In every country where midwifery as a profession is strong, outcomes are better, without exception. In every single country, the perinatal outcomes, the maternal outcomes, the cost, and the quality. It's so simple. In every country where you have strong midwifery and they're allowed to be midwives, not dominated and managed by obstetricians, but respected, collaborating peers, outcomes are better. Next slide, please. You would know that the global strategy for women's, children's, and adolescents' health, which goes through to 2030, talks about we need to move from surviving to thriving to transforming. We're so often still stuck in surviving, and that's important. And in some places in Indonesia, surviving is your priority. But how do we move to the next level to say that birth can actually transform a woman and a partner, her parenting, our society? Look at some of the terrible leaders in the world today. Imagine if we brought more love into birth, more love into parenting, more love into the world. Could we potentially change the ridiculous decisions that some very stupid white men mainly are making about our world today? So we need to move beyond surviving to thriving to transforming. And then women will truly be roaring with power. And when you have women roar with power, you have a world that is powerful, because we are the hand that rocks the cradle. And we need to absolutely respect that. Midwives are the answer. Next slide, please. Those are some of the publications. If anyone wants to take a picture, those are some of the publications that I discussed today. If you're wondering where they all came from, those were all our publications that I've just gone over. Next slide, please. And that's it from me. Thank you all very, very much. Terima kasih and monggo monggo.
Okay. Okay, it's already been delivered, the material for today. Oh my God, that was so wonderful and excellent. So right now I'm going to open the Q&A session. But first, guys, I need to tell you that we only accept like a 3 question because of the time. Well, I didn't realize it's already 11:48 because we spent it together. So it's so wonderful. So anyone in here want to ask or have a question? Okay. Oh.
We all want koala bears, don't you?
Yeah. I do believe that. Okay. I do believe that everyone in here just want the koala.
Okay. An evidence-based koala, though.
Yeah.
Okay, hello, Prof. Hannah. My name is Riris. I am a final year professional midwifery student. First of all, I would like to apologize if my English is not very good. In Indonesia, especially in hospital setting, midwives often have limit autonomy. The care plan is largely determined by doctors, and midwives are expected to follow medical orders. This hierarchy system can make it difficult for midwives to resist unnecessary intervention and fully practice woman-centered care. For example, some women express discomfort with procedures such as urinary catheterization, which can limit mobility, reduce their sense of independence, and negatively affect their childbirth. Moreover, decisions regarding the mode of delivery are often made by doctors, not midwife or not woman. In this kind of context, what practical strategies can midwives use to advocate for women, ensure their voices are heard, and help minimize unnecessary intervention? How can midwives navigate these institutional and hierarchy constraints while still upholding the principle of woman-centered care? Thank you, Prof.
Such a brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant question. So number one, I would say continuity of midwifery care. What that does is not only develop trust and respect between the midwife and the woman, it gives the woman a voice, it gives the midwife commitment and strength to advocate for the woman, and it improves your skills because you're dealing with every single area. You're not just dealing with antenatal, you're also dealing with the consequences of your care. So you remember very well the advice you gave back here led to that. And so you'll become very conscious and very much improving your practice. The continuity of midwifery care. Number two, and this is where I want to actually really commend Dizza here, is politics. One of the things I learned early in my life is I couldn't just be a midwife, I had to be a politician. I had to get good at media. I had to get good at meeting with ministers and with senators and going to parliament and standing on a soapbox and speaking. And Dizza's brilliant at that. So what are your professional organizations who advocate for you doing? What are the voices going to government? Start to involve your legal people, like lawyers who are very feminist. Get them involved to advocate for the human rights angle. And I guess the final thing that's really key is really good quality education so that the midwife is as competent as she needs to be to perform her role safely. And that will help gain the respect of doctors. So if we have competent midwives who know when to refer, when not to refer, and we have models of care that give midwifery autonomy, and we have advocates up at the politics, legal, and professional level, if you tap all of those three things, you can transform maternity care. It's those three things that transformed maternity care in Australia. So I know they sound so easy, me sitting here and saying, but you have already started all three. So please keep going because I think you are on the way to a great future. Oh, come and get your koala bear.
Please come. Get
That
your
was
koala.
an excellent question. That would make a really good essay question, wouldn't it? For a political essay. Thank you.
Okay, maybe another one, guys. Anyone? Okay, wait, wow, there's a lot of people actually want to ask. Wait. I'm going to count. Okay, the fast, the fast one. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I think that's one.
Good morning, Professor Hannah. I'm sorry in advance because I'm a little nervous because it is my first time speaking in English in front of a great audience here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ki Queen. I'm a final professional student in midwifery program study. So as we know, in Indonesia, there are many hospitals that doesn't apply skin-to-skin contact and even early breastfeeding. There are so many hospitals in Indonesia that doesn't apply the treatment. When babies are born, they are immediately cord clamping and taken to separately room, and the parents are given informed consent from healthcare. Parents are given informed consent about formulation milk giving to the babies. So in this hospital, the parents are given informed consent about the babies will given formulation milk from the nurse. So it is not exclusive breastfeeding, right? What's your opinion about this? Because this is happened in many hospitals in Indonesia. Thank you.
So, excellent question. It's against WHO guidelines. So that's a very powerful start. It's against the best evidence. I would suggest that you are the future leaders. So we should never sit and look for someone else to solve the problem. What say, what are you going to do about it? And yes, you may feel like I'm only second year, I'm, a long way to go. But who do you respect in your organization? Who are your leaders? Who are your managers? Are you engaged with your professional body? Where are the voices that can have advocacy, that can help? Where is the committee that formulates the policies in your organization? These are the things that you need to get involved in and start having the conversations and start to lead the change, because it is against WHO recommendations. It is against UNICEF. It is against level 1 evidence. So you've got everything on your side to now seek out the people who you can get to help you have a voice, the committees you can join, and the professional body that you are hopefully a member of that you can start to lobby to assist you. Diza, I'm thinking, is there a breastfeeding organization? Okay, what is it called? Association. So the breastfeeding midwives. Okay. And that has lots of consumers, so it has women in there. Yeah. So get the consumers involved. They're very powerful when they come to meet with the head of the maternity unit and say, we are not happy with what's happening with you separating our babies, that you are offering formula. This is against regulation. So try several things, but I'd also, to take Gandhi's words, be the change you want to see in the world and be brave. It's amazing when you're brave, you start to realize actually people do listen if you do it in a really sensible, strong and kind way. Come and get your bear. Too scared to get your bear? That was a great question as well. Thank you so much for that question. And it's hard, and I'm not saying it's not hard. It's very, very hard. But I hope that in 10 years, your name is one of the names that's in the conferences. Your name is one of the names in the professional body, that your name is one of the names changing things.
Okay, maybe for the last one, I guess we can do like last question. That one. Let's keep going. Yes. Okay, it's going to be the last question.
Okay, thank you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Siti Mirnawati from midwifery student at Erlangga University. Sebelumnya, izinkan saya bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia. Saya ingin bertanya, tadi di slide dijelaskan bahwasannya untuk mengurangi intervensi yang tidak perlu, yaitu induksi, WHO menyarankan untuk menunggu hingga kehamilan 41-42 minggu. Namun sepengetahuan saya, sebelumnya mohon maaf kalau ini kurang tepat, tapi sepengetahuan saya fungsi plasenta itu menurun di usia kehamilan di atas 40 minggu sehingga disarankan untuk dirujuk. Nah, apakah kebijakan tersebut itu berbasis baik secara evidence based atau justru malah meningkatkan intervensi yang tidak perlu, yang tidak dibutuhkan oleh ibu. Kemudian saya juga ingin bertanya, budaya di pelayanan kesehatan Indonesia itu menurut saya SOP-nya masih kaku dan juga masih banyak tekanan. Sehingga ada mindset yang menyatakan bahwasannya kalau kita tidak melakukan apa-apa, kalau intervensinya itu lebih banyak, maka pelayanannya lebih baik. Nah, sehingga muncul rasa takut pada beberapa tenaga kesehatan kalau kita itu tidak melakukan apa-apa, takutnya dikira tidak kompeten ataupun malah pasien tidak percaya kepada kita. Sehingga saya ingin bertanya bagaimana cara untuk mengubah rasa takut tersebut itu menjadi kewaspadaan yang justru sehat dan bisa kita lakukan, kita pilih intervensi yang memang diperlukan oleh ibu. Terima kasih.
Okay, terima kasih atas pertanyaannya. Bisa tepuk tangan dulu? Give applause first. Okay. Well, she's really enthusiastic to Aussie. So the first question is about reducing the unnecessary intervention. She asked about in your material is actually you say that we need to wait until the gestation is actually 41 or 42 weeks, but between but in her opinion that what she learned, the function of the placenta is actually not really good at that week. So is it really necessary that we need to wait until that age of stage for the mother? And also the second question, it's more like about the culture in here. So in here in Indonesia, there's say that telling if the intervention was actually like a little, or maybe we doesn't give the mother any intervention, the patient or the mother is going to think like, oh, you're not competent midwife, you're not competent with, you give me nothing, and then you just say, you just do this, but without giving me any medicine, any injection or anything, so you're not competent, right? Like that. So she just asking about your opinion about that.
So on the first one, can you hear okay? I think so. WHO recommends that you would discuss induction at 41 weeks, so that would occur between 41 and 42 weeks. We know the big jump occurs after 41 weeks. Before that, yes, there's small increases. If there's any indication or any risk factor before that, you wouldn't wait to 41 weeks. But if everything's well and the woman is happy and the baby is growing well and everything is okay, we know the risk really increases after 41 weeks. So that's why the WHO, the NICE guidelines, all of the recommendations are to recommend induction of labor after 41, between 41 and 42. After 42, the risks double. So double. Yeah. There's the second, sorry, what was the second one again?
About your opinion in Indonesian culture.
Oh,
yeah, that when
offering the intervention, and if you
Yes.
don't. So yes, that's very hard. And I know that sometimes we have women come from countries like China who say, cut me, because they're used to episiotomy. And it's very hard during labor and birth to be saying, no, you don't need to be cut, it's all okay. So that's where education needs to come in long before the birth. We can't just expect in the birth that we're going to first have these conversations. So what about antenatal education? Helping women understand why those interventions may harm them and their babies, why we should use them when we need to, why we shouldn't use them when we don't. And I'd say the second thing is continuity of care. Because where there's a relationship and the woman trusts you and you trust the woman, and you have a relationship and you are kind and you're not doing nothing. You're not doing nothing. You're massaging, you're crooning, you're supporting, you're helping her, you're getting the shower running or whatever. You're not doing nothing. You're giving care. But I think, if we think about those strategies, it's less of an issue. But I do recognize women's mothers have told them this will happen. Women's friends have told them this will happen. It'll take another generation of Indonesian women for a culture to shift. But we can start now so that the daughters of these women have a different birth.
Okay, is that answer your question? Yes? Which one?
Oh, teddy bear.
Okay, come front to get your koala bear. Okay, so that's end our Q&A session for today, guys. I say thank you for everyone in here that really excited to following our material and Q&A session. So maybe for Prof Hannah, you can go back to your seat. Thank you. Please give applause. Okay. So for the next agenda, I will be giving it back to our Master of Ceremony, Anjani. For Anjani, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kak Didi. So let's give a big applause for today's agenda, especially for our speakers, moderator, and all participants. And it has been a wonderful day. We have a lot of discussion today. And as we come to the end of today's event, first of all, I would like to sincerely thank our speakers and for sharing such a valuable experience and insight, and also our moderator, Kak Didi, and all participants who have engagedly active discussion with us today. And before we close, I hope that today's what we learned today won't stop here, but shape us for not only care women for evidence-based, but also compassionate and women-centered. And before we close, last but not least, we will now maybe move on to our documentation session. For all the participants, may I kindly invite everyone to stand up, please? And Mbak Nesi? Yeah. Everyone, please stand up. And for Prof. Hannah, Dr. Hazel, and all the lecturers from Midwife, maybe you can get into the middle, yeah? And also, students from Western Sydney University, you can also get into the middle too. Mungkin untuk beberapa teman-teman yang mau maju juga boleh. Ya. Yang mana? Oh ini, untuk teman-teman mungkin karena ini railingnya kosong bisa digeser, dipenuhi ya. Jadi yang di samping bisa merapat ke tengah, bagian sana juga yang di samping bisa merapat ke tengah supaya nggak kosong. Ya, oke, oke, good, sudah? Apa?
Depan ini bisa agak center Mbak, soalnya itu kan nggak di tengah kan ini.
Oh, okay. So everyone, could you please move into the left? Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, to be in the middle. Okay. Bu Woro? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, sudah. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next. Three, two, one. Okay, is there any sign like thumbs up or oh yeah, a happy one? Thumbs up. Love sign, love sign. Everyone love sign. Tiga, dua, satu. Freestyle, freestyle. Three, two, one. Okay. Okay, thank you so much everyone for participating today. We have such a very wonderful day right now. Okay. Okay. Oh, teman. Okay, everyone. I hope that what we have learned today won't stop here. Once again, I would like to give a thank you to our speakers, moderators, and all participants. Thank you for your kind of attention. Have a wonderful day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Huh?